I stood frozen in my apartment doorway watching my sister Meredith slice through my brand new nursing scrubs with surgical scissors. Navy blue fabric fell like confetti around her feet. "Find a different hospital," she hissed, her face twisted with rage. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I turned to see Mrs. Patricia Harmon, the head nurse of Riverside General, holding a welcome basket. She'd come to personally greet me before my first shift. Her eyes moved from Meredith to the destroyed scrubs, then back to me. The silence in my apartment felt suffocating as Mrs. Harmon stepped inside, her professional demeanor intact, despite the chaos she'd witnessed. Meredith stood there, scissors still gripped in her right hand, pieces of navy fabric clinging to her old college sweatshirt. The morning light streaming through my window seemed too bright for this moment, illuminating the destruction of what should have been my fresh start. "These were hospital property," Mrs. Harmon said, calmly setting the welcome basket on my kitchen counter. Her voice carried decades of authority, the kind that came from managing emergency rooms and training countless nurses. "Would someone like to explain what's happening here?" My throat felt dry as I struggled to find words. How could I explain years of family dysfunction to my new supervisor? How could I tell her that my own sister had just sabotaged my first day at the job I'd worked so hard to earn? "She doesn't deserve to work there," Meredith spat, finally lowering the scissors. "She stole everything from me, my dreams, my future, even my recommendations." Mrs. Harmon's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of her surprise. She pulled out her phone, and I initially thought she might call security or the police. Instead, she opened what appeared to be a note-taking app. "Perhaps we should all sit down," she suggested, gesturing to my small living room. "I find that situations like these often have deeper roots." As we moved to the living room, memories flooded back. 5 years ago, Meredith had been the one in nursing school. She'd entered with such confidence, always talking about how she was born to be a healer. Our parents had been so proud, throwing her a party when she got accepted, buying her expensive textbooks without complaint. I remembered visiting her during her clinical rotations, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes. She'd complained about the instructors being too harsh, the patients too demanding, the hours too long. Every phone call home became a litany of grievances. Someone was always out to get her, always trying to make her fail. The truth came out during her 3rd semester. She'd failed her medication administration exam 3 times. She'd been caught sleeping during a night shift. Then came the final blow, falsifying patient documentation because she'd forgotten to check vital signs. The nursing program had no choice but to dismiss her. But that wasn't the story she told our parents. According to Meredith, jealous classmates had conspired against her. Vindictive instructors had targeted her. The whole system was rigged to favor students who knew how to play politics rather than those with natural talent. Our parents believed every word. They'd invested so much emotion and money into her dream that accepting the truth felt impossible. Dad grew quiet, avoiding the topic altogether. Mom became Meredith's fiercest defender, calling the school, threatening legal action, demanding meetings with administrators. During this chaos, I was working 3 jobs just to pay rent and save for community college. I served coffee at 5 in the morning, stocked shelves in the afternoon, and cleaned offices at night. Nobody noticed when I enrolled in prerequisite courses. Nobody celebrated when I aced anatomy and physiology while sleeping 4 hours a night. When I finally saved enough to apply to nursing school myself, I did it quietly. I didn't want to hurt Meredith, who had moved back home and spent her days researching conspiracy theories about the medical establishment. I studied in the public library instead of at home, told my parents I was taking general education courses. "You were always the sneaky one," Meredith said now, perched on the edge of my second-hand armchair. "Watching me fail, learning from my mistakes, planning your attack." "That's not what happened," I said softly. "I just wanted to help people. It wasn't about you." "Everything was always about her," Meredith told Mrs. Harmon. "Ever since we were kids, Zoe studied me. She watched what I did, then figured out how to do it better. She's a parasite." Mrs. Harmon continued taking notes, her expression neutral. "When did you graduate from nursing school, Zoe?" 6 months ago, I replied. I passed my NCLEX on the first try and started applying to hospitals immediately. She only got into Riverside because she stole my recommendation letter. Meredith interrupted, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a crumpled paper, smoothing it against her thigh. Professor Janet Coleman wrote this for me before the conspiracy against me started. Somehow Zoe got her hands on it and submitted it as her own. She thrust the paper at Mrs. Harmon, who accepted it with steady hands. As the head nurse read, I saw her eyes narrow slightly. The paper looked official enough with the college letterhead and what appeared to be Professor Coleman's signature. "This is dated last month," Mrs. Harmon observed. "But you said you left the program 5 years ago." Meredith's face flushed. She asked for an updated one because she knew I was planning to reapply. She remembered my potential. "I see." Mrs. Harmon took a photo of the letter with her phone. "And you believe Zoe stole this? Check her email. Check her application. You'll see she used my recommendation to get hired at your hospital. She probably hacked into my account to forward it to herself." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that Professor Coleman had written my recommendation after supervising my clinical rotations, after watching me care for patients with compassion and competence. But Mrs. Harmon raised a hand slightly, a gesture that suggested patience. "These are serious allegations," she said finally. "Fortunately, they should be easy to verify." She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through her contacts. "Professor Coleman is actually my sister-in-law. She married my brother 15 years ago. I think I'll give her a call and ask about this recommendation letter." The color drained from Meredith's face as Mrs. Harmon hit the call button. Mrs. Harmon put the phone on speaker, setting it on my coffee table where we could all hear. The dial tone seemed to echo in the tense atmosphere of my small apartment. Through the thin walls, I could hear my neighbor's television playing a morning talk show, such a normal sound for what had become anything but a normal day. Patricia. Professor Coleman's familiar voice filled the room. "What a pleasant surprise. Aren't you supposed to be welcoming your new nurse today?" "I'm actually at her apartment now, Janet," Mrs. Harmon replied, her eyes fixed on Meredith. "There's been an interesting development. I'm here with Zoe and her sister Meredith." A pause on the other end. Meredith is there." "Yes, and she's presented me with a recommendation letter that appears to be from you, dated last month. She claims Zoe stole it and used it to get hired at Riverside." "That's impossible," Professor Coleman said immediately. "I haven't had any contact with Meredith since she was dismissed from the program 5 years ago. I certainly haven't written any recommendation letters for her." Meredith jumped up from the chair, her hands clenched into fists. "She's lying. You all planned this together. I know how these families work, protecting each other, shutting out anyone who threatens your little medical dynasty." "Meredith, please sit down," Mrs. Harmon said, her voice carrying the same calm authority she probably used with agitated patients. "Janet, are you able to come here? I think we need to resolve this situation properly." "I'm actually just finishing breakfast at the diner on Maple Street," Professor Coleman replied. "I can be there in 10 minutes. "We'll wait for you," Mrs. Harmon said, ending the call. The 10 minutes felt like hours. Meredith paced my small living room, muttering under her breath about conspiracies and favoritism. She pulled out her phone several times, typing furiously before shoving it back in her pocket. I recognized the behavior from years of watching her spiral when things didn't go her way. "You know what she's doing, don't you?" Meredith suddenly whirled on me. "She's calling her sister-in-law to get their stories straight. They're probably texting right now, making sure their lies match up." "Mrs. Harmon's phone has been on the table this whole time," I pointed out quietly. "You always do that," Meredith shouted. "Always pointing out little details, making me look crazy. That's how you operate, isn't it, death by 1,000 tiny cuts?" A knock on the door interrupted her tirade. It wasn't Professor Coleman, though. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, peered in with concern. "Is everything all right, Zoe?" I heard shouting. Before I could respond, Meredith laughed bitterly. "Oh, perfect. Another witness to make me look like the bad guy. Did Zoe pay you to show up right now?" Mrs. Chen's eyes widened as she took in the scene: the destroyed scrubs on the floor, the scissors abandoned on the side table, Meredith's flushed face and aggressive posture. "Should I call someone?" Mrs. Chen asked carefully. "Everything's under control," Mrs. Harmon assured her. "We're just working through a family matter." More neighbors had begun to gather in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. I recognized Mr. Rodriguez, the building superintendent, making his way through the small crowd. "Miss Zoe, is there a problem here?" He stepped inside his keys, jangling on his belt. His expression changed when he saw Meredith. "Oh, you're back." "You know my sister?" I asked, surprised. Mr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. "She's been here several times over the past few months, usually when you're at work. She told me she was a nurse asked about accessing the medical supply closet we keep for emergencies." "That's not illegal," Meredith said quickly. "I was just trying to help. Mrs. Peterson in 4B has diabetes, and sometimes she runs out of testing supplies. I was being a good Samaritan." By using a hospital ID, Mr. Rodriguez pulled out his phone, showing us a security photo. There was Meredith holding up what looked like an official hospital identification badge. "You said you worked at Riverside General, said you were on the emergency response team." Mrs. Harmon leaned forward to examine the image. "That's a forgery. Our badges have holographic security features. This is just a laminated printout." "I was preparing." Meredith's voice rose higher. "I knew I'd be working there eventually once I exposed the truth about how they rejected me. I was just rehearsing." "Rehearsing by taking medical supplies?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. "I did an inventory last week. We're missing several boxes of gauze, a blood pressure cuff, and a stethoscope." "Those were borrowed, not stolen," Meredith insisted. "I was practicing, keeping my skills sharp for when I get my license back." "You never had a license," I said quietly. "You didn't graduate from nursing school." "Details," Meredith screamed. "You always focus on meaningless details instead of seeing the bigger picture. I have the heart of a nurse. I have the calling. That matters more than some piece of paper." Another knock interrupted us. This time it was Professor Coleman, slightly out of breath from hurrying over. She took in the scene with the practiced calm of someone used to chaos. "Well," she said, her eyes landing on the destroyed scrubs, "this is quite a situation. Janet." Meredith's entire demeanor changed, becoming almost childlike. "Tell them how you mentored me. Tell them how the school politics forced you to fail me. You remember how good I was with patients, don't you?" Professor Coleman's expression was sad but firm. "Meredith, you were dismissed for falsifying patient records. You documented medications you never gave and vital signs you never took. That's not politics. That's endangering lives." "One mistake," Meredith protested. "One tiny error in judgment, and they destroyed my entire future." "It wasn't one mistake," Professor Coleman said gently. "There were multiple incidents. Failed exams that you claimed were unfairly graded. Missing clinical hours you said you'd completed. And then the medication theft." The room went silent. Even the neighbors in the hallway stopped whispering. "That was never proven," Meredith said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Only because the hospital decided not to press charges," Professor Coleman replied. "They showed mercy, hoping you'd get help and choose a different path." Mrs. Harmon had been typing on her phone during this exchange. She looked up with a grim expression. "I just received a concerning text from our pharmacy director. Someone matching Meredith's description has been attempting to fill prescriptions at several pharmacies in town, claiming to be a nurse practitioner at our hospital." "Those were legitimate prescriptions," Meredith said quickly, for my patients, my private patients." "What patients?" I asked. "You're not licensed to see patients." "The people who believe in me," she shouted. "The ones who know the medical establishment is corrupt. They come to me for real healing, not the poison you people push." Professor Coleman and Mrs. Harmon exchanged worried glances. This was worse than any of us had imagined. My sister wasn't just lying about her credentials. She was potentially practicing medicine without a license. "Meredith," Professor Coleman said carefully, Have you been prescribing medications to people? Natural remedies, Meredith said defensively. Herbs and supplements. Things that actually work, not the pharmaceutical garbage that keeps people sick. But you mentioned prescriptions, Mrs. Harmon pressed. At real pharmacies, those require DEA numbers and medical licenses. Meredith's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went white. I have to go. I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Rodriguez said, positioning himself near the door. Not until we sort this out. You can't keep me here. Meredith's voice rose to a shriek. This is false imprisonment. I'll sue all of you. The hospital, the school, this building. You're all part of the conspiracy to keep me from my calling. Her phone buzzed again, and this time I caught a glimpse of the screen. The text preview showed, "Police at pharmacy asking questions. Don't come here." Mrs. Harmon saw it too. She pulled out her own phone with a heavy sigh. "I think we need to involve the authorities. This has gone beyond a family dispute." "No, wait." Meredith lunged for Mrs. Harmon's phone, but Professor Coleman stepped between them. "You don't understand. If you call the police, they'll twist everything. They'll make me look like a criminal when I'm just trying to help people." Mrs. Harmon had already started dialing, her expression resolute. "I have a responsibility to report potential medical fraud. You've been impersonating a healthcare provider." As she spoke quietly to the dispatcher, Meredith turned on me with venom in her eyes. "This is all your fault. If you had just stayed in your lane, none of this would have happened." My lane. I felt years of suppressed frustration bubbling up. What exactly is my lane, Meredith? The background, the shadows. The place where I'm supposed to stay quiet and clean up your messes. "You were supposed to support me," she screamed. "That's what family does. Instead, you watched me struggle and then swooped in to take what was mine." Professor Coleman shook her head. "Zoe earned her place through hard work and dedication. She spent countless hours studying, volunteering, and proving herself. She didn't take anything from you. She took my dream." Meredith's voice cracked. "Nursing was my calling, my identity. Then she saw me fail and decided to show everyone how much better she could do it." "I started taking prerequisites before you even left nursing school," I said quietly. "I didn't know you were going to fail. I just knew I wanted to help people, and healthcare felt right to me." "Liar," Meredith spat. "You probably sabotaged me, reported me for those stupid documentation errors, got your little study group friends to spy on me." Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Speaking of documentation, Miss Meredith, I need to know more about your access to our medical supplies. I have security footage of you entering that closet multiple times over the past 3 months." "I told you I was helping residents," Meredith said, but her hands were shaking now. "Which residents specifically?" Mr. Rodriguez pulled out a small notebook. "I'll need to verify that with them." I don't remember all their names. Mrs. Peterson, like I said, and others. Elderly people who couldn't afford supplies." "Mrs. Peterson has excellent insurance," Mr. Rodriguez said slowly. "Her daughter is a doctor. She's never mentioned needing emergency supplies." The lies were unraveling faster now, each thread pulling loose and revealing more deception underneath. I watched my sister's face cycle through emotions: anger, fear, desperation, and back to anger. "Fine," she said finally. "I took some supplies, so what, they were just sitting there gathering dust. I was using them to practice to keep my skills fresh for when I get back into a program." "You mean the skills you were using on your private patients?" Mrs. Harmon asked, finishing her call with the police. "The ones you were writing prescriptions for?" "I never said I was writing prescriptions," Meredith backpedaled. "You misunderstood." "We all heard you," Professor Coleman said gently. "Meredith, this has gone too far. You need help." "I don't need help," Meredith shouted. "I need people to stop sabotaging me. First the nursing school, then the hospitals, now my own family. You're all threatened by me because I see through the lies of modern medicine." A memory surfaced suddenly sharp and clear. 3 months ago, I'd found a box hidden in my childhood bedroom closet during a visit to our parents. Inside were medical forms, prescription pads, with different doctors' names, even a notary stamp. I'd convinced myself they were old, maybe from some administrative job Meredith had mentioned, but never started. "The box," I said suddenly, "in your old closet at Mom and Dad's house." Meredith's face went pale. "You went through my things." I was looking for my old textbooks, but I found prescription pads Meredith, blank ones with different doctors' names, and patient forms that looked official but weren't from any real clinic. "Those were templates," she said weakly, "for my business plan, for when I opened my own practice." "You can't open a practice without a license," Professor Coleman said. "Meredith, please tell me you haven't been seeing patients using those forms." Meredith's silence spoke volumes. Mrs. Harmon typed something else on her phone, her expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "I just received another message," she said. 3 different pharmacies have reported suspicious prescriptions in the last month, all claiming to be from doctors who say they never wrote them, all for controlled substances. "That wasn't me," Meredith said immediately, but her voice lacked conviction. "The pharmacists provided descriptions," Mrs. Harmon continued. "A woman in her early 30s, medium height, brown hair, claiming to be picking up medications for homebound patients." "That could be anyone," Meredith protested. "They have security footage," Mrs. Harmon said simply. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in as the magnitude of Meredith's deceptions became clear. This wasn't just about jealousy or family dysfunction anymore. This was about potential federal crimes, about putting vulnerable people at risk. "I need some air," Meredith said suddenly, moving toward the door. Mr. Rodriguez didn't budge. "I think it's best if we all wait here for the authorities, miss." "You can't hold me prisoner." Meredith's voice was shrill, now desperate. "I know my rights. This is kidnapping." "No one's holding you prisoner," Mrs. Harmon said calmly. "We're simply asking you to wait while we sort out these serious allegations. If you're innocent, as you claim, then you should want to clear your name." "Clear my name," Meredith laughed bitterly. "With all of you conspiring against me, you've probably already decided I'm guilty. Just like the nursing school did, just like everyone always does." "The nursing school gave you multiple chances," Professor Coleman said sadly. "I personally advocated for you after your first failed exam. I arranged extra tutoring, extended deadlines, offered every support we could." "You patronized me," Meredith shot back. "Treated me like I was stupid instead of recognizing that I learned differently, that I have gifts that can't be measured by your rigid tests." "Medical knowledge isn't rigid," I said, finding my voice again. "It's precise because people's lives depend on it. When you give someone the wrong medication or the wrong dose, they can die. That's not about different learning styles. That's about safety." "Says the perfect student," Meredith sneered. "The one who never made mistakes, who memorized everything and regurgitated it on command like a good little robot." "I made plenty of mistakes," I said. "But I learned from them. I asked for help when I didn't understand something. I didn't blame others or make excuses." "Because you didn't have to," Meredith exploded. "Everything came easy to you. You didn't have instructors who hated you, classmates who sabotaged you, a whole system working against you." "Those things didn't happen to you either," Professor Coleman said firmly. "I was there, Meredith. I saw your struggles. They weren't because people were against you. They were because you refused to accept responsibility for your actions." The sound of sirens in the distance made everyone tense. Meredith's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal looking for escape. "This is insane," she muttered. "Calling the police because I cut up some stupid scrubs, because I borrowed some bandages." "You know it's more than that," Mrs. Harmon said. "The forged prescriptions alone are a federal offense. Identity theft if you've been using other doctors' DEA numbers, not to mention the potential harm to patients." "What patients?" Meredith demanded. "You keep talking about patients like I've hurt someone. I've helped people. People who couldn't afford your overpriced medical system. people who needed someone to listen to them instead of just pushing pills. "What kind of help did you provide?" Professor Coleman asked carefully. "What medications were in those prescriptions?" Meredith pressed her lips together, finally seeming to understand that anything she said could make things worse. The sirens grew louder, and through my window, I could see police cars pulling into the apartment complex parking lot. This was really happening. My sister, who I'd protected and covered for my entire life, was about to be arrested. "Meredith," I said urgently, "tell them the truth. Whatever you've done lying will only make it worse. Maybe they can get you help instead of prison," she finished bitterly. "You'd love that, wouldn't you, big sister locked away while perfect Zoe starts her perfect career at the perfect hospital?" "I don't want you in prison," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "I want you to get help, real help. This isn't you. This isn't the sister who used to bandage my scraped knees and tell me stories when I couldn't sleep." For just a moment, something flickered in Meredith's eyes, a glimpse of the person she used to be before the anger and blame consumed her. Then it was gone, replaced by the hard mask she'd worn for years. "That sister was weak," she said coldly. "She believed in a system that betrayed her. I'm stronger now. I see the truth." The police were at the door now, their knocks firm and authoritative. Mr. Rodriguez looked at Mrs. Harmon, who nodded. He opened the door to reveal 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a suit. "We're responding to a report of prescription fraud and identity theft," the detective said, showing his badge. "I'm Detective Marcus Washington. Is Meredith here?" All eyes turned to my sister, who stood straighter, lifting her chin defiantly. "I'm Meredith," she said, "and I want a lawyer." Detective Washington stepped into my apartment with the practiced ease of someone who'd walked into countless tense situations. His partners, Officers Liu and Bennett, flanked him, their hands resting casually but ready on their duty belts. The small space felt even more cramped with 3 more bodies, added to our already crowded gathering. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about prescriptions filled at several local pharmacies." Detective Washington said, his voice professional but not unkind. He was older, probably in his 50s, with gray threading through his close-cropped hair and lines around his eyes that suggested he'd seen too much, but still maintained compassion. "I told you I want a lawyer," Meredith repeated, crossing her arms over her chest. "That's your right," the detective acknowledged. "But maybe you can help us clear up some confusion first. We've had reports of someone matching your description, attempting to fill prescriptions for controlled substances. The prescriptions appeared legitimate, but the doctors whose names were on them claim they never wrote them." Mrs. Harmon stepped forward. "Detective, I'm Patricia Harmon, head nurse at Riverside General. I called this in after discovering that Ms. Meredith here has been impersonating medical staff at our facility." She gestured to the destroyed scrubs on the floor. "This started as a family dispute, but it's revealed something much more serious." Detective Washington's eyebrows rose as he took in the scene, the scattered fabric, the scissors, the mix of family members, medical professionals, and building staff all bearing witness to what should have been my first day at a new job. "Let's start from the beginning," he said, pulling out a small notebook. "Who wants to explain what happened here?" Professor Coleman cleared her throat. "I can provide some background. I'm Janet Coleman, professor at the nursing college. I taught both sisters, though, at different times. Meredith was dismissed from our program 5 years ago for academic failures and ethical violations, including falsifying patient documentation and suspected medication theft." "Suspected," Meredith interjected. "Never proven, and I was set up. The other students planted those medications in my bag because they were jealous of my natural abilities." Detective Washington made a note. "And you are," he asked, turning to me. "Zoe. I'm Meredith's younger sister. I just graduated from nursing school and was supposed to start at Riverside General today. Mrs. Harmon came to welcome me, and we found Meredith destroying my scrubs." "She stole my life," Meredith burst out. "My career, my future, even my recommendation letters. Check her application to Riverside. She used my credentials." "We've already established that's false," Mrs. Harmon said calmly. "Professor Coleman confirmed she never wrote any recommendation for Meredith. The letter Meredith produced appears to be forged. Detective Washington examined the crumpled letter Meredith had shown earlier, now sitting on my coffee table. He photographed it from several angles before placing it in an evidence bag. "Forgery is a serious accusation," he said. "But let's focus on the prescriptions for now. Ms. Meredith, have you been writing or filling prescriptions?" "I want a lawyer," she repeated, but her voice wavered. "Here's what we know." Detective Washington continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Over the past 6 weeks, someone has attempted to fill prescriptions at 7 different pharmacies. The prescriptions were for oxycodone, Xanax, and Adderall. They had different doctor names and DEA numbers, but the handwriting was similar. 3 pharmacies filled the prescriptions before becoming suspicious. 4 others refused and reported them." The room went silent except for the hum of my old refrigerator. Even the neighbors in the hallway had stopped whispering. "The person filling these prescriptions claimed to be picking them up for elderly patients in home care," the detective continued. "They showed various forms of medical identification, all of which we now believe were forged. 2 pharmacists took photos of the ID presented." He pulled out his phone and showed an image to Mrs. Harmon and Professor Coleman first. Their faces grew grave. "That's a fake Riverside General ID," Mrs. Harmon confirmed. "Our badges have specific security features this lacks." Detective Washington then showed the phone to me. My heart sank. It was clearly Meredith in the photo holding up the forged hospital ID, smiling at the pharmacy counter as if she had every right to be there. I was picking up medications for patients," Meredith said weakly. "People who needed help." "Which patients?" Detective Washington asked. "We'll need their names to verify your story." They prefer to remain anonymous. They don't trust the system. "The system that requires prescriptions for controlled substances to prevent addiction and overdoses?" the detective asked pointedly. Officer Liu stepped forward. "Ma'am, we also have reports from 2 individuals who claim they paid you for medical consultations. They said you diagnosed them and provided prescriptions." "Consultations aren't illegal," Meredith said desperately. "I was just giving advice, like a wellness coach." "Wellness coaches don't write prescriptions," Professor Coleman said sadly. "Oh, Meredith, what have you done?" "What I had to do," Meredith suddenly screamed. "None of you understand. The medical system failed me, threw me away like garbage. But people still needed help. Real help, not the assembly line treatment you provide. I was filling a need." "You were committing fraud," Detective Washington said bluntly, "and potentially endangering lives. Do you have any medical training in drug interactions, proper dosing, contraindications?" "I studied all of that," Meredith insisted. "Just because I didn't get a piece of paper doesn't mean I don't know the information." "The pharmacology exam you failed 3 times suggests otherwise," Professor Coleman said quietly. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Meredith pointed at her former professor. "One test, one arbitrary measurement, and suddenly I'm unqualified. I have instincts. I can read people, understand what they really need." "Instincts don't replace medical knowledge," I said, unable to stay silent. "What if you gave someone a medication they were allergic to? What if you prescribed something that interacted with their other medications? You could kill someone." "But I didn't," Meredith shot back. "No one's been hurt. I've helped people who had nowhere else to turn." Detective Washington sighed heavily. "Actually, that's not entirely true. One of the prescriptions you filled was for an elderly woman named Dorothy Hutchins. The Xanax you gave her interacted with her heart medication. She's been in the hospital for 3 days." The color drained from Meredith's face entirely. That's not possible. I asked about her medications. She said she wasn't taking anything else." "She has dementia," the detective said grimly. "Her daughter found your prescription and the pills when she was rushed to the ER. Mrs. Hutchins didn't remember taking other medications because she doesn't remember much of anything these days, which is why she needs actual medical professionals overseeing her care." "I didn't know," Meredith whispered, sinking onto my couch. "She seemed fine. She said she just needed something for anxiety." This is why we have medical licenses." Mrs. Harmon said, her voice mixing disappointment with anger. "This is why we have years of training and supervised practice, not because we're trying to keep people out, but because making mistakes in medicine can be fatal." Will she be okay?" Meredith asked, and for the first time in years I heard genuine fear in her voice. "She's stable now," Detective Washington said, "but it was touch and go for the first 24 hours. Her family is considering pressing charges for assault and elder abuse in addition to the fraud charges." "Elder abuse," Meredith's voice cracked. "I was trying to help her." "Your intentions don't matter when the result is harm," the detective said firmly, "and this is just one case we know about. How many other people have you been treating? How many other interactions might we not know about yet?" Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "There's more. She's been telling residents here that she's a nurse. At least 3 elderly tenants have mentioned getting medical advice from her. Mrs. Thompson in 2C said Meredith gave her some pills for her arthritis." "Oh my God," I breathed. "Mrs. Thompson has kidney problems. She can't take most anti-inflammatories." Detective Washington immediately radioed for another unit to check on Mrs. Thompson. The reality of what Meredith had done was sinking in for everyone in the room. This wasn't just fraud or family drama. This was a public health crisis. "How did you get the prescription pads?" the detective asked. "Who gave you access to DEA numbers?" "I found them," Meredith said unconvincingly. "Where?" "Different places. Sometimes in trash cans outside medical offices. Sometimes people sold them to me online." "You bought fraudulent prescription pads on the dark web." Officer Bennett spoke up for the first time, incredulous. "It's not the dark web," Meredith protested, "just forums for people who understand alternative medicine, people who've been failed by the system like me. People who profit from others' desperation, you mean?" Professor Coleman said sadly. "Meredith, you've been scammed. Those forums are run by criminals who prey on people like you, people who think they know better than trained professionals." "You don't understand," Meredith said, but the fight was going out of her. "When you took everything from me, when you destroyed my dreams, I had to find another way. People needed help, and I could provide it." "You provided false hope and real danger," Mrs. Harmon said. "Every prescription you wrote, every diagnosis you made without proper training or authority, you risked someone's life. That's not helping. That's playing Russian roulette with other people's health." Detective Washington stood up. "Ms. Meredith, I'm placing you under arrest for prescription fraud, identity theft, practicing medicine without a license, and reckless endangerment. Additional charges may be filed as we investigate further." As Officer Liu moved to handcuff her, Meredith looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "This is your fault," she whispered. "If you had just supported me, if you had helped me get back into school instead of taking my place, none of this would have happened." "No," I said firmly, finally finding my strength. "This is your fault, your choices, your lies, your refusal to accept responsibility. I'm done taking the blame for your failures." As the officers led her toward the door, Professor Coleman called out, "Meredith, wait. There's something else you should know. The State Board of Nursing has been investigating fraudulent applications to nursing programs across the state. Your name came up multiple times. Were you applying to other schools using false transcripts?" Meredith stopped in the doorway, her shoulders sagging. "I just wanted another chance," she said quietly. "Was that so wrong?" "The lying was wrong," Professor Coleman said gently. "The forgery was wrong, the fraud was wrong, but mostly putting innocent people at risk was wrong. You crossed lines that can't be uncrossed." As the police led my sister away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that her dangerous charade was over guilt, that I hadn't recognized the extent of her delusions, sooner anger at the destruction she'd caused, and underneath it all, a deep sadness for the sister I'd lost long before this day. Mrs. Harmon put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "This isn't your fault," she said softly. Sometimes people we love make choices we can't control or fix. I looked at the destroyed scrubs, still scattered on my floor, the fabric that was supposed to represent my new beginning, now torn beyond repair. But standing there, surrounded by people who'd stood up for truth and safety, I realized Meredith hadn't destroyed my future. She'd only delayed it. "What happens now?" I asked Mrs. Harmon. "Now," she said with a small smile, "we get you some new scrubs and reschedule your first day. Riverside General needs nurses like you, Zoe, nurses who understand that integrity matters as much as skill." As Professor Coleman and Mr. Rodriguez began to disperse the crowd in the hallway, I bent down to gather the ruined fabric. Each piece felt like a symbol of the relationship Meredith and I had lost, torn apart by lies and jealousy, and the dangerous belief that wanting something badly enough justified any means to get it. But I was done mourning what couldn't be salvaged. It was time to build something new. The apartment felt eerily quiet after the police left with Meredith. Mrs. Harmon was making calls to reschedule my orientation. Professor Coleman was texting colleagues about the unfolding situation, and Mr. Rodriguez had gone to check on Mrs. Thompson. I was sweeping up the last pieces of fabric when I heard familiar voices in the hallway. "Where is she? Where's my baby?" My mother's shrill voice echoed through the thin walls. My stomach dropped. Of course someone had called them. In our small town, news traveled faster than wildfire, and the sight of police cars at my apartment complex would have reached my parents within minutes. Mom burst through my still open door with Dad trailing behind her, his face wearing that familiar expression of resigned discomfort. She took in the scene, the remnants of blue fabric in my dustpan, the scissors still on the side table, the evidence bags Detective Washington had left for additional documentation. "What did you do?" she demanded, turning on me with eyes blazing. "What did you do to your sister?" Mrs. Harmon stepped forward, her professional demeanor intact. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your daughter Zoe hasn't done anything wrong." Mom barely glanced at her. "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to my daughter, who apparently had her own sister arrested. Zoe, how could you—" "I didn't have her arrested," I said quietly, setting down the dustpan. "She was arrested for prescription fraud and identity theft. She's been impersonating medical professionals and illegally distributing controlled substances." Lies. Mom's face was red now, reminding me of Meredith in her fury. My daughter would never do such things. She's a healer. She has a gift. You've always been jealous of her gift. Dad shifted uncomfortably by the door, his hands deep in his pockets. He'd worn that same expression through every family crisis present, but not really there. A ghost haunting his own life rather than participating in it. Mrs. Sullivan, Professor Coleman, interjected, "I taught both your daughters. What Meredith has done is serious. An elderly woman is in the hospital because of medications Meredith illegally prescribed." Mom whirled on her. You're the one who destroyed her dreams. She told me all about how you played favorites, how you sabotaged her education because she threatened your little academic club." "That's not true," Professor Coleman said patiently. "Meredith was given multiple opportunities to succeed. She chose to falsify documentation and steal medications instead. She made one mistake." Mom's voice rose higher. "One tiny error in a moment of stress, and you destroyed her entire future. Do you know what that did to her? Do you know how she suffered?" "It wasn't one mistake," I said, finding my voice. "And you know it wasn't. You've been covering for her for years." Mom's eyes snapped to me, dangerous and cold. "What did you say?" "I said, you've been covering for her, lying for her, enabling her delusions instead of getting her help." The words tumbled out, years of suppressed truth finally breaking free. Every time she failed, you blamed someone else. Every time she lied, you believed her. Every time she needed money for another fresh start, you gave it to her. "I supported my daughter," Mom shot back. "Something you clearly know nothing about. Family stands by family, Zoe. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've always been selfish, always focused on yourself instead of helping your sister. Helping her what? I demanded. Destroy her life. Hurt innocent people, enable her fantasies until someone died. No one died, Mom insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. Not yet, Mrs. Harmon said quietly, but Mrs. Hutchins came very close, and there may be others we don't know about yet. Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda, maybe we should listen. Don't you start, Mom rounded on him. You've never supported her either. Always so disappointed, always so quiet. At least I tried to help our daughter. You helped her lie, I said. You helped her pretend. You gave her money that she used to buy fake prescription pads and forged IDs. Did you know about that, Mom? Did you know she was using the money you gave her to commit crimes? She was investing in her future. Mom's defense sounded hollow even to her ears. She told me she was taking online courses preparing to reapply to nursing school. With what transcripts? Professor Coleman asked gently. She was expelled. That goes on permanent records. No legitimate nursing school would accept her without extensive remediation and proof of addressing the issues that led to her dismissal. Then the system is broken, Mom declared. If they won't give second chances to someone with Meredith's compassion and natural healing abilities, then the system deserves to be circumvented. Mom, I said, exhaustion weighing down my words. She could have killed someone. She prescribed Xanax to a woman with dementia who was already on heart medication. That's not compassion. That's dangerous ignorance. She didn't know about the heart medication, Mom protested. Exactly. I threw up my hands. She didn't know because she's not trained to know, because she didn't finish school, because she refused to learn the boring, systematic things that keep people safe. But you convinced her that her gift was more important than actual knowledge. How dare you? Mom's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. How dare you stand there in judgment when you stole her dream? I didn't steal anything. The frustration boiled over. I worked 3 jobs to pay for school. I studied every night until my eyes burned. I missed family gatherings and holidays because I was working or in class. Where were you then, Mom? Where was your support when I was killing myself to afford textbooks? You didn't need support, Mom said dismissively. Everything always came easy to you. You never struggled like Meredith did. Dad made a small sound, almost like a laugh, but bitter. Everyone turned to look at him. Easy, he said, his voice stronger now. Linda, do you remember when Zoe was working at the coffee shop, the warehouse, and cleaning offices? Do you remember when she fell asleep standing up at Christmas dinner because she'd been awake for 36 hours? She chose to work that hard, Mom said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Because we gave all our money to Meredith, Dad said quietly. Every time she needed to start fresh, every time she had another scheme, the online certifications that turned out to be scams, the medical equipment she bought for her future clinic, the apartment deposits she lost when she got evicted for practicing medicine illegally. Michael, Mom gasped. How can you say such things? Because they're true, he said, and for the first time in years, I saw something like backbone in his posture. We spent Zoe's college fund on Meredith's lies. We spent our retirement savings on lawyers when she got in trouble before. We've been living in denial, Linda, and now someone's in the hospital because of it. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of sirens, a reminder that the consequences of our family dysfunction had spread far beyond these walls. You all planned this, Mom said, finally, her voice shaking. You all conspired to turn against Meredith when she needed us most. No one conspired, Mrs. Harmon said firmly. Your daughter committed serious crimes. She put lives at risk. She needs to face consequences, not enablers. Mom grabbed her purse, clutching it like a shield. I'm going to the police station. I'm going to get my daughter out and find her a lawyer who will expose this witch hunt. Linda, Dad said, I'm not coming with you. She froze at the door. What? I'm not coming, he repeated. I'm done enabling this. I'm done pretending. Meredith needs help. Real help, not more lies and excuses. She needs her family, Mom's voice cracked. She needs consequences, Dad said sadly. Maybe if we'd given her those instead of excuses 5 years ago, that elderly woman wouldn't be in the hospital right now. Mom looked between us, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. You're choosing her. You're choosing Zoe over your own daughter. They're both my daughters, Dad said quietly, but only one of them is honest. Only one of them worked for what she has. Only one of them considers other people's safety more important than her own ego. This isn't over, Mom hissed, focusing her venom on me. When Meredith gets out, when she proves her innocence, you'll see what you've done. You'll see how you destroyed your own sister out of jealousy and spite. She stormed out her heels, clicking angrily down the hallway. Dad stood there for a moment, looking older than his years. I'm sorry, he said to the room at large, for all of it. For the money, for the enabling, for staying quiet when I should have spoken up. I thought keeping peace was the same as keeping family together. I was wrong. He looked at me directly then, and I saw tears in his eyes. I'm proud of you, Zoe. I should have said that years ago. I should have said it every day you came home exhausted from work and still studied. I should have protected your dreams the way I protected Meredith's delusions. Dad, I started, but he shook his head. I need to go think, he said, to figure out how to fix what I can and accept what I can't. Your mother, she'll need time, maybe a lot of time, but I want you to know that I see you now. I see what you've accomplished, despite us, not because of us. After he left, the apartment felt hollow. Mrs. Harmon and Professor Coleman exchanged meaningful looks. Family dynamics often enable this kind of behavior, Professor Coleman said gently. It's not uncommon in cases like this. What's going to happen to her? I asked, sinking onto my couch. To Meredith, I mean. Mrs. Harmon sat beside me. That depends on a lot of factors. The extent of her crimes, whether more victims come forward, whether she cooperates with authorities. But Zoe, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to your own future and to the patients you'll serve. I keep thinking, I said slowly, if I'd spoken up sooner, if I'd told someone about the forged documents I found, maybe Mrs. Hutchins wouldn't be in the hospital. Or maybe Meredith would have just been more careful about hiding her activities, Professor Coleman said. You can't take responsibility for choices you didn't make. Your sister is an adult who made deliberate decisions to deceive and harm others. Mr. Rodriguez returned, then looking grim. Mrs. Thompson is okay, but she did take some pills your sister gave her. Thankfully, her daughter found them before she took many. They're having her kidney function tested just to be safe. Another person potentially harmed by Meredith's delusions of medical competence. Another family dealing with the fallout of her crimes. The detective wants to interview other residents, Mr. Rodriguez continued, to find out if anyone else received medical advice or medications from her. This is bigger than we thought. I thought about all the times Meredith had visited supposedly to see me, but always happening to run into elderly neighbors in the hallway. Her charm and false credentials would have made them trust her, believe her lies about being a nurse who could help them navigate the confusing healthcare system. She targeted vulnerable people. I said, the realization hitting hard. People who were desperate, confused, or couldn't afford proper care. She knew exactly what she was doing. That's what predators do, Mrs. Harmon said bluntly. They find people who are vulnerable and exploit their trust. Your sister may have convinced herself she was helping, but her actions show a pattern of deliberate deception and exploitation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart sank. It was from one of Meredith's friends, someone I'd met once at a family gathering. How could you do this to your own sister? She was just trying to help people. You're a monster. Block the number. Professor Coleman advised seeing my face. There will probably be more like that. People who bought into her narrative, who see her as a victim rather than a perpetrator. She was right. By evening, I'd received dozens of messages from Meredith's supporters people. She'd convinced that the medical establishment was corrupt and she was a maverick healer. Each message stung, but not as much as the knowledge that Meredith had built an entire network of enablers beyond our family. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the day's revelations. "Now," Mrs. Harmon said firmly, "you report to Riverside General tomorrow at 7 a.m. for orientation. You begin the career you've worked so hard for. You honor the trust patients will place in you by being the ethical, competent nurse you've trained to be." "But what about all this?" I gestured vaguely at my phone, the destroyed scrubs, the general chaos of my life. "This will pass," she assured me. "The truth has a way of surfacing, and those who choose to ignore it will face their own consequences. Your job is to focus on your future, not to fix everyone else's delusions." As they prepared to leave, Professor Coleman pulled me aside. "Zoe, I want you to know something. In all my years of teaching, I've seen maybe a handful of students with your combination of intelligence, work ethic, and genuine compassion. Don't let your sister's crimes dim your light. The medical field needs people like you." After everyone left, I stood alone in my apartment, surrounded by the debris of what should have been a day of celebration. Tomorrow, I would start my nursing career without family support, carrying the weight of my sister's crimes and my mother's rejection. But I would start it with integrity intact, knowing that I'd earned my place through honest work and genuine dedication. That had to count for something. I picked up the last piece of torn scrub from the floor, holding it up to the fading light. Tomorrow, I'd wear new scrubs, ones that no amount of jealousy or rage could destroy. Tomorrow, I'd begin proving that healing required more than good intentions and family connections. It required truth, and for the first time in my life, I was free to live it. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything from the previous day feel like a bad dream, except the evidence was all around me. The scissors, still on my table, the business cards from Detective Washington and Mrs. Harmon, and the 37 unread messages from unknown numbers that I'd eventually just turned off notifications for. I was preparing for my rescheduled first day when Dad showed up at my door at 6 a.m. looking like he hadn't slept. He was carrying a banker's box and wearing the same clothes from yesterday. "I need to show you something," he said without preamble. Something I should have dealt with years ago. I let him in, noting the deep lines around his eyes and the way his hands shook slightly as he set the box on my kitchen table. "Dad, are you okay? Where did you stay last night?" "Hotel," he said shortly, then laughed without humor. "First time in 32 years I haven't slept in my own bed, but I couldn't go back there not after finally seeing what we've done." He opened the box and pulled out folders, bank statements, and printed emails. The papers were organized with the kind of meticulous care that told me he'd spent the entire night going through them. "After yesterday, I went to the bank," he said. "I knew something was wrong with our accounts, had known for a while, but your mother always handled the finances. Said it was easier that way. I was a coward and let her." He spread out the statements, and my heart sank as I recognized my own name on several of them. Accounts I'd never opened, credit cards I'd never applied for, loans I'd never taken. Meredith started small. Dad explained his finger tracing the transactions. "A credit card here, a small loan there, always in your name because your credit was perfect and hers was destroyed. Your mother knew. She had to co-sign for some of these because Meredith needed a permanent address that wasn't hers." I stared at the evidence of systematic identity theft dating back 3 years. This is thousands of dollars. $23,000 in total, Dad said quietly, plus the scholarship money she intercepted. The Branson Foundation scholarship for $15,000 that you won junior year. She had the check redirected to a P.O. box. The Edwards Memorial Fund for $8,000, same thing. The monthly stipend from the Hartley Women in Medicine program, she's been collecting it for 2 years. My legs felt weak. I'd wondered why some of my scholarships never materialized, but between work and school, I'd assumed there was some administrative error. I'd been too exhausted and too trusting to investigate further. She knew I was struggling. I said, remembering the nights I'd skipped meals to afford textbooks, the times I'd walked 5 miles to save bus fare. She watched me work myself to death, and she was stealing from me the whole time. Your mother justified it, Dad continued, pulling out printed emails. Said you were managing fine without the money, that Meredith needed it more. Said it was family money anyway, that it should go to whoever needed it most. I read through the emails between my parents, each one a fresh betrayal. Mom strategizing about how to keep me from finding out, Dad weekly protesting before inevitably giving in, Meredith demanding more money for various schemes and ventures. This one, Dad pointed to an email from 6 months ago. This is when she started talking about opening her own wellness clinic. She said she needed capital to rent space and buy equipment. Your mother gave her access to your information to apply for a business loan. In my name, I felt sick. $25,000, he confirmed. Currently in default because she never made a single payment. Your credit is destroyed, Zoe. I ran a report last night. He showed me the credit report, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Collections accounts missed payments, credit cards maxed out and abandoned. My score had dropped from excellent to poor, all while I'd been carefully managing my actual finances. Why didn't the bank contact me? I asked, though I suspected the answer. The contact information was all changed to Meredith's phone and email. She intercepted everything, even had mail forwarded from your campus mailbox to that P.O. box. Dad pulled out more evidence receipts for the P.O. box rental in my name, forwarding orders from the post office. I need to call the police, I said, reaching for my phone. Add this to her charges. There's more, Dad said, stopping me. The medical supplies Mr. Rodriguez mentioned. She bought those using credit cards in your name. The forged prescription pads paid for with your identity. If investigators don't look closely, you could be implicated in her crimes. The full horror of what Meredith had done hit me. Not only had she stolen my financial future, she'd potentially tied me to her illegal activities. Every fraudulent prescription, every illegal medical consultation could be traced back to accounts bearing my name. Your mother knew all of this, I asked, though the emails had already answered that question. She knew about the financial theft. I don't think she knew about the medical fraud, or at least she convinced herself she didn't. Dad rubbed his face tiredly. I found out about some of it last year, but she said it was temporary, that Meredith would pay it back once she got established in her new career. What new career? She can't practice medicine legally. Your mother believed she'd find a way. Alternative medicine wellness coaching, something that would make her successful without traditional credentials. She kept saying Meredith just needed one more chance, one more investment. My phone rang. Mrs. Harmon's name appeared on the screen. Good morning, Zoe. I hope you're ready for orientation today. Actually, I said, looking at the papers spread across my table, there's been a development. I've just discovered extensive identity theft and fraud in my name. I think I need to deal with this before I start work. There was a pause. Related to your sister, $23,000 in theft plus another $33,000 in fraudulent loans and credit cards, I said numbly, all connected to her illegal medical activities. I see. Mrs. Harmon's voice was compassionate but practical. Here's what we're going to do. Come in for orientation as planned. Our legal department deals with identity theft cases for employees, regularly, unfortunately. We'll connect you with resources and help you navigate this. Don't let your sister steal your first day along with everything else. After I hung up, Dad started gathering the papers back into the box. I'll come with you to file reports. I'll testify about what I know. It's the least I can do. Dad, why now? I asked. Why didn't you do something sooner? He was quiet for a long moment. Fear, I suppose. Fear of losing your mother. Fear of confrontation. Fear of admitting I'd failed as a parent. But yesterday, hearing about that elderly woman in the hospital, seeing you stand there with such dignity while your mother attacked you, I realized my cowardice had enabled real harm. Is Mom really at the jail trying to bail Meredith out? She spent the night there. Last I heard, bail was set at $200,000 given the flight risk and severity of charges. Your mother's trying to mortgage the house. The house you live in. Not anymore, he said firmly. I'm filing for divorce, Zoe. 32 years and I'm done. I can't be married to someone who would sacrifice one daughter to enable another's delusions. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of family dissolution heavy between us. There's something else, Dad said eventually. Something that might help with the financial mess. I have a separate account your mother doesn't know about. My father left me some money when he died and I never told her because I think part of me always knew this day might come. It's not much, about $50,000, but it's enough to hire a lawyer and start untangling the identity theft. Dad, I can't take your money. It's not taking. It's returning what was stolen, at least partially. Please, Zoe, let me do one right thing in this mess. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We gathered everything and headed to my car. As we drove toward the hospital, I thought about the twisted path that had led us here. Every enabling moment, every excuse, every blind eye had built toward this reckoning. She called me last night, Dad said suddenly. Meredith, from jail. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What did she say? That you destroyed her life. That you'd always been jealous of her gifts. That if I loved her, I'd make this go away. He laughed bitterly. Even facing federal charges, she can't admit fault. It's everyone else's conspiracy, everyone else's jealousy, never her own choices. Do you think she really believes it? Dad considered. I think she's told the lie so long it's become her truth. And your mother reinforced it every step of the way. They created a shared delusion where Meredith was always the victim, always the misunderstood genius held back by lesser people. We arrived at Riverside General, the morning sun making the glass doors shine like a promise. Inside, Mrs. Harmon waited with a woman in a sharp suit who introduced herself as the hospital's legal counsel. We've seen situations like this before, the lawyer said after reviewing the documents. Healthcare workers are often targets for identity theft, sometimes by family members who know their schedules and have access to personal information. We'll help you file charges and recover what we can. As we worked through the paperwork, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I looked. It was a photo of Mom at the jail, looking haggard and desperate, with the caption, "Look what you've done to our family." I showed it to Mrs. Harmon, who shook her head. "Block the number. Focus on your future, not their manipulation." But I couldn't help wondering, was this what Meredith felt when she was expelled? This mix of relief and grief, freedom and loss. The difference was she'd had family support while destroying herself. I was rebuilding with only the truth and a few unexpected allies. "Ready for orientation?" Mrs. Harmon asked once the legal consultation was complete. I thought about the thousands in debt now attached to my name, the criminal investigation I was now part of, the family that had imploded spectacularly. Then I thought about Mrs. Hutchins in her hospital bed, the other potential victims still being discovered, and the patients who deserved nurses, who put their well-being above all else. "Yes," I said firmly, "I'm ready." Dad squeezed my shoulder as I prepared to follow Mrs. Harmon. "I'm proud of you," he said again, "for whatever that's worth from someone who should have protected you better." It was worth more than he knew, not enough to erase the years of neglect and enablement, but enough to suggest that maybe from the ashes of our dysfunctional family, something healthier might grow. As I walked into the hospital for my first real day as a nurse, I left the weight of financial betrayal and family drama at the door. Inside these walls, I had a different identity, not the sister of a criminal, not the daughter of enablers, but a healthcare professional with hard-won knowledge and genuine commitment to healing. Meredith had stolen my money, my credit, and my family's trust, but she couldn't steal what mattered most, my integrity, my education, and my future, that I'd earned entirely on my own. 2 weeks into my orientation at Riverside General, I was finally finding my rhythm. The other new nurses had been welcoming my preceptor was patient and knowledgeable, and I'd discovered a passion for cardiac care that surprised me. For 8 to 12 hours a day, I could forget about the chaos outside the hospital walls. But chaos has a way of finding you. I was finishing my shift, changing out of my scrubs in the locker room, when Sarah, another new nurse, approached hesitantly. "Zoe, there's something weird on the hospital Facebook page. I think you should see it." She handed me her phone, and my heart sank. There was a public post from someone named Truth Seeker Justice with my picture from the hospital website. "Beware Riverside General employs nurse who destroyed her own sister's career out of jealousy. Zoe Sullivan had her sister arrested on false charges to eliminate competition. Her sister Meredith was the real healer, helping those the system abandoned. Now she's in jail while the imposter works at your hospital. Is this who you want caring for your loved ones?" The post had been shared 47 times in the 2 hours since it was posted. The comments ranged from supportive of me to viciously attacking my character. Some claimed to be former patients of Meredith's praising her healing abilities. Others questioned the hospital's hiring practices. "I reported it," Sarah said quietly, "but I thought you should know." I sank onto the locker room bench, exhaustion washing over me. It had been 2 weeks of police interviews, legal filings, and credit repair attempts. Dad had been true to his word, helping me navigate the identity theft charges, but Mom had gone full scorched earth. "Thanks," I managed. "I should probably tell Mrs. Harmon." "She already knows," Sarah said. "She's in her office if you want to talk to her." I found Mrs. Harmon on the phone, her expression grim. She waved me in and put the call on speaker. "Understand your concern, Mr. Morrison, but I assure you we've done thorough background checks on all our nurses. Miss Sullivan is a victim of identity theft, not a perpetrator." The man on the phone wasn't convinced. "But if there's this much drama in her family, how can we trust her with patients? What if her sister shows up here?" "Her sister is currently in custody facing federal charges," Mrs. Harmon said patiently. "She poses no threat to our patients or staff." After several more minutes of reassurance, she hung up and looked at me. "Third call today. Your mother has been busy." "I'm so sorry," I said. "I never imagined she'd target the hospital." "Sit," Mrs. Harmon commanded, and I did. "This isn't your fault, but we need to discuss how to handle this. The hospital will support you, but you need to be prepared for things to get worse before they get better." "Worse how?" "Your sister's preliminary hearing is next week. These accusations will likely intensify as it approaches. We've already had someone claiming to be a documentary filmmaker contact us about the healer persecuted by the medical establishment." I put my head in my hands. Maybe I should resign. I don't want to bring this drama to the hospital. "Absolutely not." Mrs. Harmon's voice was firm. "That's what they want. Your mother and sister want you to give up to validate their narrative that you're the villain. You're an excellent nurse, Zoe. Your preceptor raves about your clinical judgment. Your patients love you. Don't let them take that away." A knock on the door interrupted us. Security entered with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, we have a situation in the lobby. A woman claiming to be Zoe's mother is here with a group of people. They're demanding to speak to administration about the unjust employment of a criminal." I felt my stomach drop. "Mom's here." With approximately 12 others, security confirmed. "They have signs." Mrs. Harmon stood. "I'll handle this. Zoe, go home. Take tomorrow off if you need it." "Noah," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "I'm done hiding. I'm done letting them control the narrative. If she wants a confrontation, she can have one." Mrs. Harmon studied me carefully. "Are you sure this could get ugly?" "It's already ugly. At least this way I can face it head on." We walked to the lobby together, security flanking us. I could hear the commotion before we rounded the corner. Mom's voice, shrill and demanding, carried over the others. "Conspiracy to destroy a natural healer." My daughter Meredith helped people this hospital turned away. She gave hope to the hopeless, and they had her arrested for it. The group around her held hastily made signs, "Free Meredith the Healer" and "Riverside protects criminals," and "Jealousy destroyed a gift." Mom saw me and her eyes lit up with malicious triumph. There she is, the sister who betrayed blood for a job, the one who sent an innocent healer to prison. The lobby was full of patients and visitors, all watching the spectacle. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely calm. This was it. The final confrontation I'd avoided for years. "Mom," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the space. "Meredith wasn't arrested because of me. She was arrested for forging prescriptions, stealing identities, and practicing medicine without a license. An elderly woman almost died because of her." "Lies," Mom screamed. "Mrs. Hutchins was helped by Meredith's treatment. The hospital is covering up their own failures by blaming my daughter." "Mrs. Hutchins is still recovering from the drug interaction Meredith caused," Mrs. Harmon interjected. "Her family is pressing charges." One of Mom's supporters, a woman I vaguely recognized from Meredith's social media, stepped forward. "Meredith helped me when no doctor would. She diagnosed my chronic fatigue when everyone else said it was in my head." "What did she prescribe you?" I asked directly. The woman faltered. "Natural supplements, vitamins." "And Adderall," I pressed. "Did she give you Adderall without proper evaluation for ADHD, without monitoring for side effects?" The woman's face flushed. "It helped me function until it didn't," another voice said from the crowd. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor, being wheeled in by her daughter. I was one of Meredith's patients, too. She gave me pills for my arthritis, told me they were natural anti-inflammatories. Turned out to be prescription NSAIDs that damaged my kidneys. I've been on dialysis for a month. The lobby went silent. Mom's supporters exchanged uncertain glances. That's not true," Mom said, but her voice wavered. "Meredith would never—" "I have the pills she gave me," Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter said, holding up an evidence bag. "The police tested them. Prescription-strength medication that should never have been given to someone with Mom's kidney problems. Medicine that any real nurse would have known was dangerous for her." "You're lying," Mom insisted. "You're all part of the conspiracy." "What conspiracy?" I asked, stepping forward. "The conspiracy where Meredith stole $23,000 from me, where she took out loans in my name, where she used my identity to buy the supplies she used to hurt people. That conspiracy—" "Family money belongs to family," Mom shouted. "You had scholarships and jobs. Meredith had nothing because she threw it away." I finally raised my voice. "She had the same opportunities I did, more even. You paid for her school while I worked 3 jobs. You covered her rent while I slept in my car between shifts. You made excuses while I made sacrifices. And now you want to blame me for succeeding where she failed. You were always jealous," Mom hissed. "Always watching her, copying her, waiting for your chance to steal her spotlight." "I was surviving," I said. "While you poured every resource into Meredith's fantasies, I was trying to build something real. And when she failed, instead of helping her face reality, you helped her construct an alternate one where everyone else was to blame." Another voice joined the fray. Detective Washington had arrived looking official and stern. "Mrs. Sullivan," he addressed my mother, "I'm going to have to ask you and your group to leave. This is private property and you're disturbing a medical facility." "We have a right to protest," one of the supporters yelled. "You have a right to peaceful assembly in public spaces," the detective corrected. "This is a hospital. You're disrupting patient care and potentially endangering people who need medical attention. Leave now or I'll arrest you for trespassing." "You should be arresting her," Mom pointed at me. "She's the real criminal. Check her apartment, check her computer. You'll find evidence that she framed Meredith." "We've checked," Detective Washington said calmly, "extensively. What we found was evidence of Ms. Zoe Sullivan being a victim of identity theft and fraud perpetrated by your other daughter. We also found evidence of Ms. Linda Sullivan potentially aiding and abetting that fraud." Mom went pale. "What? You co-signed loans in Zoe's name. You helped redirect mail. You had knowledge of the identity theft and failed to report it. That makes you an accessory." "I was helping my daughter." "You were helping her commit crimes," the detective said flatly. "I suggest you leave now and find yourself a lawyer." The fight went out of Mom suddenly. Her supporters began to drift away, unsure what to believe anymore. Only the true believers remained muttering about conspiracies and injustice. "This isn't over," Mom said to me, her voice low and venomous. "When Meredith gets out, when she proves her innocence, you'll regret this. You'll see what you've destroyed." "I see it clearly," I replied. "I see a woman who could have been a legitimate healer if she'd accepted help and accountability. Instead, she became a danger to the very people she claimed to serve, and you enabled every step of her descent." Security escorted them out while Detective Washington remained behind. "That was brave," he said to me. "Also probably ill-advised. They're escalating because the evidence against your sister is overwhelming. The pharmacy surveillance footage alone will likely result in conviction." "How many victims?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "We've identified 17 so far. Most were elderly or economically disadvantaged. She specifically targeted people who were less likely to question her or report problems." He paused. "One man had a seizure from incorrectly dosed medication. He's lucky to be alive." 17 people. 17 people who trusted my sister because she presented herself as a medical professional. 17 people whose lives were endangered by her arrogance and my family's enabling. "Your mother might face charges too," Detective Washington continued. "The financial crimes are clear-cut. She knowingly participated in identity theft." "I know," I said quietly. "I've accepted that my family is gone." After he left, Mrs. Harmon walked me back to the locker room. The other staff members I passed offered supportive nods or touches. Word had already spread about the confrontation. "Take the rest of the day," Mrs. Harmon said. "Process this. Tomorrow you come back and focus on what matters, your patients and your career." I gathered my things in a daze. 2 months ago, I'd been a new graduate excited to start my career. Now I was the center of a criminal investigation estranged from my mother and watching my sister face potential decades in prison. But as I walked to my car, I realized something had shifted during that confrontation. For the first time in my life, I'd stopped apologizing for my success. I'd stopped making excuses for their failures. I'd stood in my truth, painful as it was. My phone buzzed. "Dad, I heard about the hospital. Are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said and meant it. "Mom might be arrested." "I know. Detective Washington called me. I'm prepared to testify about the financial crimes if needed." "Dad, this is destroying our family." "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "Our family was destroyed years ago by lies and enabling. This is just revealing what was already broken. Sometimes things need to be completely demolished before you can build something better." He was right. The family I'd grown up in, built on dysfunction and delusion, was gone. But from its ashes, maybe something healthier could grow. A relationship with my father based on honesty. A career built on merit. A life free from the toxic dynamics that had nearly drowned us all. As I drove home, I passed a billboard for Riverside General. "Healing with integrity," it proclaimed. I joined this profession to help people to be part of something meaningful and true. Meredith had wanted the title without the work, the authority, without the responsibility. She'd wanted to be called a healer while causing harm. I wanted something different. I wanted to earn the trust patients placed in me. I wanted to deserve the privilege of caring for people at their most vulnerable. That started with truth, no matter how painful, and today, finally, I'd told it. 3 days after the hospital confrontation, I was reviewing cardiac medications with my preceptor when security paged me to the administrative office. Detective Washington was waiting, his expression more serious than I'd seen before. "Zoe, we need to talk about new developments in your sister's case," he said, gesturing for me to sit. Mrs. Harmon was already there, looking concerned. "What kind of developments?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "We've uncovered a larger network. Your sister wasn't working alone. She was part of a group calling themselves Alternative Healers United. People with various medical backgrounds who lost their licenses or never completed training. They've been sharing resources, including forged prescription pads and DEA numbers. He pulled out a tablet showing me screenshots from encrypted messaging apps. Meredith's username was prominent in discussions about liberating medicine from corporate control and helping those the system abandons. This group has been operating across 3 states, Detective Washington continued. Your sister was one of the most active members. She recruited others, taught them how to forge documents, and shared stolen physician information. How many people? I asked weakly. At least 30 that we've identified. But here's the serious part. Last week, one of their patients died. A 43-year-old construction worker named James Chen. He had diabetes and high blood pressure. Someone from this group gave him natural supplements that interfered with his insulin. He went into diabetic coma and never recovered. The room went cold. A man was dead. Someone's husband, father, son was gone because people like my sister thought they knew better than trained professionals. Did Meredith? Not directly, but she trained the person who did, showed them how to present themselves as legitimate, how to gain trust, what to say, to make people believe traditional medicine was failing them. He pulled up another document. We have chat logs where your sister specifically advised this person to target working-class patients who couldn't afford regular doctor visits. I felt sick. This wasn't just Meredith's delusion anymore. She'd weaponized it, spread it like a virus to other vulnerable people who then endangered innocent lives. The federal prosecutor is upgrading charges, Detective Washington explained. This is now a RICO case, racketeering. Your sister was essentially running a criminal enterprise. She could face 20 to life. 20 to life. The words echoed in my head. My sister, who once played dress-up as a nurse with me when we were children, might spend the rest of her life in prison. There's more, he said gently. We need to know if she ever tried to recruit you, if she ever suggested you help her access hospital systems or prescription pads. Never, I said immediately. She hated that I was in nursing school. She saw me as competition, not a potential ally. That may have saved you, Mrs. Harmon said quietly, if she'd implicated you in any way. Your mother, however, Detective Washington continued, and my heart sank further. We found evidence she was more involved than we initially thought. She didn't just help with the financial fraud, she actively recruited patients for Meredith, told people at her church, her book club, her gym about her daughter, the alternative healer, who could help them outside the system. How many? I whispered. At least 9 people that we've confirmed. 3 of them ended up hospitalized from complications. Your mother would vouch for Meredith's credentials, even showing fake diplomas and certifications Meredith had created. The scope of the deception was staggering. This wasn't a desperate person making bad choices. This was a calculated operation that had endangered dozens, possibly hundreds of people. Your father has been cooperating fully, Detective Washington added. He's provided financial records, emails, even recordings of conversations where your mother and sister discussed their plans. He says he started documenting things about a year ago when he realized how deep this went. Dad was gathering evidence. He says he knew this day would come. He wanted to protect you when it did. The detective pulled out another file. Which brings me to why I'm really here. The prosecution wants you to testify, not just about the identity theft, but about your sister's history. Her dismissal from nursing school, her pattern of blaming others, the escalation of her behavior. Testify against my own sister. Testify for the victims, he corrected. For Mrs. Hutchins, who's still in rehabilitation. For Mrs. Rodriguez, who needs dialysis 3 times a week. For James Chen's widow and 2 young children. They deserve justice. I thought about the man who died believing he was getting help, about his children growing up without a father because someone prioritized their ego over his safety. I'll testify, I said quietly. There's one more thing, Detective Washington said, his tone becoming even more serious. We arrested someone else this morning, your mother. The words hit like a physical blow. Despite everything, despite her enabling and lies and the confrontation at the hospital, she was still my mother. She's being charged with accessory to fraud identity theft and now potentially involuntary manslaughter for her role in recruiting James Chen to your sister's care," he explained. "Her bail hearing is this afternoon." "Does she have a lawyer?" "She refused one. Says she'll represent herself because all lawyers are part of the conspiracy against Meredith." He shook his head. "I've seen a lot of family crimes, but this level of shared delusion is remarkable." After he left, I sat with Mrs. Harmon in stunned silence. My entire family was imploding in the most public, devastating way possible. "I know this is overwhelming," Mrs. Harmon said finally, "but you're handling it with remarkable grace. Lesser people would have crumbled or lashed out." "I don't feel graceful," I admitted. "I feel like I'm watching a car accident in slow motion and the car is full of people I used to love." "Used to?" I considered the question. "I love who they were, or who I thought they were, but those people might have never existed. Maybe I was always loving my idea of them rather than the reality." My phone buzzed. Dad again. "Your mother called me from jail. She wants you to bail her out." "I can't," I said immediately. "I won't." "I know, I told her that. She says you're dead to her." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. No parent should ever say that to their child." "She chose Meredith," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "She's been choosing Meredith my whole life. This is just the final version of a choice she made decades ago." That evening, I attended my first Al-Anon meeting, though my family's addiction wasn't to substances, but to lies and enabling. The parallels were striking as I listened to others share their stories of loving people who'd chosen their addiction over reality, over family, over safety. My sister's addiction is to being right. I shared when it was my turn. To being special, misunderstood, persecuted. And my mother's addiction is to protecting that delusion. They've built an entire alternate reality where they're heroes and everyone else is a villain. And now people are dying because of it. The group listened without judgment as I outlined the medical fraud, the identity theft, the recruitment of other delusional people into their dangerous fantasy. The hardest part, I concluded, is that they genuinely believe they're helping people. They've convinced themselves that causing harm is actually healing, that lying is truth-telling, that crime is justice. How do you grieve people who are still alive but completely lost to their own delusions? After the meeting, a woman approached me. She was older, with kind eyes and weathered hands. "My son was like your sister," she said. "Brilliant, charismatic, absolutely convinced he knew better than everyone else. He ended up in prison for running a Ponzi scheme, destroyed dozens of families' savings while believing he was a financial genius helping people. How did you cope?" "By accepting that the son I raised and the man he became were two different people. By testifying at his trial to protect his victims. By learning that love doesn't mean enabling and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." She squeezed my hand. "Your testimony might save lives. That matters more than family loyalty to people who've forgotten what family means." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about James Chen's children, about Mrs. Rodriguez, hooked to a dialysis machine, about how many other victims might be out there afraid to come forward, or not even realizing they'd been harmed. At 3 a.m., I made a decision. I opened my laptop and began writing. To anyone who was treated by Meredith Sullivan or someone from Alternative Healers United. My name is Zoe Sullivan. Meredith is my sister. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside General Hospital, and I'm writing to urge you to seek legitimate medical care immediately if you received any treatment medication or medical advice from my sister or her associates. These individuals were not licensed medical professionals. Any medications they provided were illegally obtained and potentially dangerous. If you're taking anything they gave you, please bring it to a real doctor or pharmacist immediately for identification. I know my sister presented herself as caring and knowledgeable. I know she made you feel heard and understood in ways the traditional medical system might not have. But caring without knowledge is dangerous. Understanding without training can be fatal. Please don't let embarrassment or fear keep you from getting real help. The emergency room staff at Riverside General is aware of this situation and will treat you with compassion and without judgment. Your life matters more than pride. I'm sorry for what my family's delusions have cost you. I'm sorry for the trust that was betrayed and the harm that was done. But it's not too late to get proper care. Sincerely, Zoe Sullivan, RN. I sent it to Detective Washington asking him to distribute it through their investigation channels. Then I sent it to local news outlets, health departments, and community centers. By morning, my phone was flooded with responses. Some were angry, calling me a traitor, but others were from victims thanking me for the warning, sharing their own stories of mysterious illnesses after taking Meredith's treatments. One message stood out. Your sister gave my grandmother pills for her dementia. We thought they were helping because she seemed calmer. Turns out they were stolen sedatives that were masking a serious infection. By the time we got real medical help, it had spread to her bloodstream. She died last month. We thought it was natural causes until we saw the news about your sister. Thank you for speaking out. We're pressing charges. Another death. Another family destroyed by my sister's arrogance. I forwarded the message to Detective Washington, then got ready for my shift. As I put on my scrubs, new ones properly purchased, legitimately earned, I thought about the oath I'd taken. First, do no harm. Meredith had inverted that oath, causing harm while believing she was helping. Mom had enabled that inversion, recruiting victims, while believing she was spreading healing. But their delusions didn't change reality. People were dead, others were damaged, families were shattered. And I would testify to every bit of it, no matter how much it hurt, because that's what real integrity looked like. Choosing truth over comfort, justice over family, and the safety of innocence over the protection of the guilty. Even when the guilty shared your blood, especially then. The day of Meredith's formal indictment arrived with unseasonable rain that seemed fitting for the occasion. Dad picked me up at 5 a.m., both of us dressed in somber, court-appropriate clothing. Neither of us had slept well in weeks. Your mother made bail, he said as I got in the car. Her book club pooled money. She's staying with one of them. Is she going to be there today? Probably. Her lawyer, she finally got one, advised against it, but you know how she is about Meredith. We drove in silence through empty streets, the rain creating rivers along the gutters. I thought about all the mornings I'd driven to school or work at this hour, exhausted but determined. Now I was driving to watch my sister face federal charges that could destroy her life. The courthouse was already busy despite the early hour. Media vans lined the street. The story of the Alternative Healers Network had gained national attention. As we walked up the steps, reporters called out questions I didn't answer. Inside, the prosecutor assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Santos met us in a small conference room. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and an air of contained energy. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know this is difficult. I want to prepare you for what you're going to hear today. The charges are extensive, and some of the victim impact statements are disturbing." She spread out documents on the table. 23 separate federal charges, including racketeering, wire fraud, identity theft, and practicing medicine without a license. The state had added charges for involuntary manslaughter in James Chen's death. Your sister's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal, Santos explained. She wants to argue diminished capacity, saying your sister genuinely believed she was helping people. But with the evidence we have, the encrypted messages, the money transfers, the organized network, it's clear she knew what she was doing was illegal. "What kind of plea deal?" Dad asked. 15 to 20 years instead of potential life. But she'd have to allocute, admit to everything, including her role in recruiting others and teaching them fraud techniques. She's refused so far. Of course she had. Admitting guilt would mean acknowledging the lies she'd built her identity around. Meredith would rather go to trial than accept she wasn't a misunderstood healer. We entered the courtroom to find it packed. Families of victims filled one side, supporters of the alternative healers filled the other. Mom sat in the front row behind the defense table wearing her best dress and a defiant expression. She saw us and her face twisted with rage. Dad steered me to seats on the prosecution's side, which felt like a physical betrayal, even though I knew it was the right choice. Then they brought Meredith in. Prison had changed her. She was thinner, her hair pulled back severely, the orange jumpsuit making her look washed out. But her eyes still held that familiar fire of self-righteousness. Judge Patricia Kovach, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to federal crimes, called the session to order. As the charges were read, each one felt like another nail in the coffin of who my sister used to be. "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Kovach asked after the lengthy recitation. Meredith stood her lawyer, trying to keep her seated. "I plead not guilty to all charges. I am a healer, not a criminal. This is persecution of those who dare to challenge the medical-industrial complex." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Her lawyer looked ready to resign on the spot. "Ms. Sullivan," the judge said sternly, "you're facing serious federal charges. This is not a platform for speeches. Do you understand the charges against you?" "I understand that the system is threatened by people like me who offer real healing instead of pharmaceutical slavery," Meredith replied. "Your Honor," her lawyer interrupted desperately, "my client is under considerable stress. We plead not guilty and request a competency evaluation." "Noted," Judge Kovach said dryly. "Now I understand we have victim impact statements." What followed was the hardest hour of my life. Mrs. Chen James's widow spoke first. She was a small woman who seemed smaller in her grief, clutching photos of her husband. James trusted her, she said, her accent thick with tears. He was scared of doctors because his father died in a hospital. When Ms. Sullivan said she could help naturally, he believed. He wanted to see our daughters graduate. Now they'll walk across that stage without their daddy because someone played pretend with his life. One after another, victims and their families spoke. An elderly man whose arthritis treatment had actually been stolen cancer medication that masked his symptoms until the disease was terminal. A young mother who'd been told her postpartum depression was toxins and given stolen antidepressants in dangerous doses, leading to a suicide attempt. A diabetic teenager whose parents had been convinced to stop his insulin in favor of natural healing, resulting in permanent organ damage. Through it all, Meredith sat straight-backed and unmoved. Occasionally, she would shake her head or mutter lies under her breath. Mom nodded along with her, glaring at each speaker as if they were the criminals. Then came a moment I'll never forget. "I'd like to call Beatrice Thompson," the prosecutor announced. A woman in a wheelchair was brought forward. It took me a moment to recognize my former neighbor. She'd aged decades in the months since Meredith's help. Her daughter pushed the chair face set in controlled fury. "Ms. Sullivan gave me pills." Mrs. Thompson said, her voice barely above a whisper, said they were natural remedies for my kidney problems. Made me feel so much better I stopped going to my real doctor. Turns out they were stolen steroids that made me feel good while my kidneys were failing. Now I'm on dialysis for whatever time I have left. My grandchildren have to watch me hooked to machines because I trusted someone who said she was a nurse. "You were already sick," Meredith burst out, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to silence her. "I gave you hope, quality of life." "You gave me false hope and real damage," Mrs. Thompson replied quietly. "I might have had years left with proper treatment. Now I have months. That's not healing, dear. That's harm." Judge Kovach had to call for order as Mom stood up shouting about persecution and lies. Security moved closer, ready to remove her. "Mrs. Sullivan," the judge addressed my mother, "one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Your daughter is facing justice for crimes that caused real harm to real people. This is not a conspiracy. This is consequences." But the damage was done. Mom's outburst had shown everyone what Meredith had become, enabled and encouraged by someone who should have helped her face reality years ago. During a recess, Detective Washington approached us. "There's been a development. We found journals in your sister's apartment. Detailed notes about each patient, including her awareness that some were experiencing adverse reactions. She documented knowing Mrs. Rodriguez had kidney problems but giving her NSAIDs anyway because the pain relief would improve her quality of life even if it shortened it. She knew, I said numbly. She knew she was hurting people. She justified it, wrote that traditional medicine's obsession with first do no harm prevented real healing, that sometimes you had to risk harm for greater good. He paused. She compared herself to revolutionaries who were misunderstood in their time. When court resumed, Santos introduced the journals as evidence. Excerpts were read aloud, Meredith's own words documenting her conscious choice to endanger patients she deemed too ignorant to make their own medical decisions. The supportive crowd began to thin. Even true believers struggled to defend someone who wrote about acceptable casualties in the war against medical tyranny. The prosecution moves to revoke bail, Santos announced. Given the defendant's own writings showing consciousness of guilt and willingness to cause harm, she poses a continued threat to public safety. Meredith's lawyer objected, but half-heartedly. The evidence was damning. Bail is revoked, Judge Kovac ruled. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. Given the evidence presented today, I also order a psychological evaluation to determine fitness to stand trial. As marshals moved to take Meredith back into custody, she looked directly at me for the first time. "You did this," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You couldn't stand that I found my calling without their approval. You had to destroy me to feel special." "No," I said, standing up. "You destroyed yourself. And you took innocent people down with you. I'm just refusing to lie about it anymore." Mom lunged toward me, but security intercepted her. "You're no daughter of mine," she screamed as they escorted her out. "You killed your sister. You killed her spirit, and now you're killing her body. I hope you're happy with your perfect little life built on her destruction." The courtroom erupted. Judge Kovac banged her gavel repeatedly, threatening to clear everyone out. Dad put his arm around me as I shook the weight of public rejection hitting harder than I'd expected. "Court is adjourned," the judge announced. "Trial date to be set pending psychological evaluation." As Meredith was led away, she began singing, a hymn from our childhood church. Mom joined in from the hallway, their voices creating a haunting duet that echoed through the courthouse. It was performative grief calculated to make them martyrs, but it still made my chest tight with loss. Outside, reporters swarmed. Dad and Detective Washington created a barrier getting me to the car. But one question penetrated. "Ms. Sullivan, how does it feel to testify against your own family?" I stopped, despite Dad's attempt to keep me moving. "It feels like choosing between two families." I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "The family I was born into and the human family that deserves protection from dangerous delusions. I chose the one that values truth and safety over blood and enabling." "Do you regret it?" another reporter called. "I regret that it was necessary," I answered. "I regret that my sister chose to hurt people rather than get help. I regret that my mother chose to enable rather than intervene. But I don't regret standing with victims over perpetrators, even when the perpetrators share my DNA." In the car, Dad broke down crying. "I lost them both today," he sobbed. "My wife and daughter. Gone." "They left a long time ago, Dad," I said gently. "They left when they chose lies over truth. Today just made it official." That evening I went to work despite Mrs. Harmon offering me time off. I needed the normalcy, the reminder of why I'd chosen this path. My patients didn't care about courtroom drama. They needed competent, caring nursing. As I checked on Mr. Patterson, a cardiac patient I'd been monitoring, he grabbed my hand. "Saw the news," he said quietly. "Takes guts to stand up like that. Your sister might have killed me with her ignorance. You're saving me with your knowledge. That's the difference between real and fake healing." Similar sentiments came from other patients throughout the shift. They'd seen the coverage, understood the stakes. Several mentioned they'd thrown out alternative remedies they'd been secretly taking, scared by how close they might have come to being victims. By the end of my shift, I was exhausted but oddly at peace. The family I'd lost had been gone long before today, consumed by delusion and denial. But the family I'd chosen, my colleagues, my patients, my profession, remained solid. Dad texted as I was leaving. "Proud of you. Mom served me divorce papers through her friend. I'm relieved. Starting therapy tomorrow. Real healing, not Meredith's version." I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage watching the sun rise over the city. Somewhere Mom was probably rallying Meredith's remaining supporters, planning protests and proclamations of innocence. Somewhere Meredith was in a cell likely composing manifestos about medical martyrdom. But here in the real world, patients needed care, families needed support, and truth needed advocates. I'd chosen my side, and despite the pain, despite the loss, I'd choose it again. Because some things matter more than blood, like integrity, like justice, like the oath to first do no harm. Even when the ones doing harm share your name. 3 weeks after the indictment hearing, I was adjusting to a new kind of normal. The media attention had died down somewhat, though I still occasionally found reporters waiting by my car. My shifts at the hospital had become a refuge, a place where I could focus on healing rather than destruction. I was checking medication orders in the cardiac unit when Mrs. Harmon appeared with someone I didn't recognize, a well-dressed woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and perfect posture. "Zoe, this is Margaret Winters," Mrs. Harmon said. "She's the hospital's chief legal counsel, but more importantly, she has experience with situations like yours." Margaret extended her hand with a warm smile. 40 years ago, my brother ran a fake cancer clinic, convinced desperate people that coffee enemas and vitamin C could cure stage 4 tumors. I was fresh out of law school when I helped prosecute him. My eyes widened. "Your own brother?" "My own brother," she confirmed. 3 people died following his treatments. Dozens more delayed real care until it was too late. Family gatherings were tense after that. We sat in the break room as Margaret shared her story. The parallels were eerie. A charismatic sibling who believed traditional medicine was corrupt parents, who enabled the delusion victims who just wanted hope. "The hardest part wasn't the trial," Margaret said. "It was the aftermath. The family divided permanently. Some relatives still think I betrayed blood for career. But the survivors' families, they send me Christmas cards. Their children grew up because I chose justice over genetics." "How did you cope with the guilt?" I asked. "By realizing the guilt belonged to him, not me. Every day I stayed silent was a day someone else might die. That's not loyalty. That's complicity." She pulled out a business card. "I'm offering pro bono legal help for your identity theft case. The hospital supports employees who stand up for what's right." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. "Dad. Detective Washington needs us at the station. They found something at your mother's friend's house." An hour later, we sat in an interview room as Detective Washington laid out evidence bags on the table. Prescription pads, DEA number lists, patient files, and boxes of medication. "Your mother's friend Diane Morrison finally agreed to a search after her lawyer explained harboring evidence is a crime," he explained. "Your mother was storing Meredith's supplies there, but that's not the biggest discovery." He pulled out a laptop. "This contains correspondence between your mother and sister going back 5 years. They discuss strategies for discrediting you if you ever betrayed the cause, including plans to plant evidence of drug theft at your workplace. They were going to frame me, if necessary. There are detailed discussions about how to access your apartment, your locker at work, even your car. Your mother provided layouts and schedules. They saw you as the enemy long before recent events." I stared at the evidence of premeditated betrayal. While I'd been working myself to exhaustion protecting family secrets, they'd been planning my destruction as a contingency. "There's more," Detective Washington continued. "The laptop contains a list of potential victims. Elderly people in your mother's social circles, their medical conditions, and their financial situations. It was a targeting database." "Like they were shopping for victims," Dad said, his voice hollow. "Essentially, yes. People with good insurance but poor health literacy. Those estranged from family who might not have advocates. Your mother marked which ones were promising based on their vulnerability. One name on the list made my stomach drop. Agnes Chen, James Chen's mother. Next to her name, Diabetic Traditional Trust's Linda from church. She recruited her own friend's son, I asked. It appears so. Mrs. Chen mentioned your mother specifically recommended Meredith for James's care. He paused. We'll need to interview her again. This could upgrade your mother's charges to murder too. The room spun slightly. Murder. My mother might face murder charges for helping kill someone she'd known for years. I need air, I said. Outside the police station, I leaned against the building, trying to process the scope of evil I'd uncovered. This wasn't delusion or misguided helping. This was predatory behavior wrapped in the language of healing. You okay? A voice asked. I turned to find Mr. Rodriguez, my apartment super approaching with coffee and a concerned expression. Saw your car, figured you might need caffeine, he said, offering me a cup. Also wanted to thank you. My mother's kidney function is improving now that she's off those pills. Doctors say she might not need permanent dialysis if she keeps healing. That's wonderful, I managed. You saved her life by speaking up, he continued. Whole buildings talking about it. Mrs. Peterson in 4B threw out some natural remedies your sister gave her last year. Turns out they were stolen thyroid medication. Could have killed her with her heart condition. Another near victim. How many more were out there? There's something else, Mr. Rodriguez said hesitantly. Few of us have been talking. We want to testify at the trial, share our experiences, make sure justice happens. You don't have to. We want to. Your sister preyed on us because we trusted your family. Your mother vouched for her to us. They used our faith in neighbors against us. That's not right. Back inside, Detective Washington had more revelations. We've been analyzing the financial records. Your sister was making significant money from this, nearly $200,000 in the past 2 years. From fake prescriptions, from consultations, medication sales, even fake medical supplies. She had a website on the dark web where people could order prescription drugs. She'd fill them using stolen credentials and ship them out. Your mother handled the packaging and mailing. Dad made a strangled sound. Linda was running a drug ring. Essentially, though they convinced themselves they were democratizing medicine and breaking Big Pharma's monopoly. The self-justification in their communications is remarkable. Santos, the prosecutor, arrived then with more news. Meredith's psychological evaluation is complete. She's been deemed competent to stand trial. No major mental illness, just narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial traits. So she knows right from wrong. Completely. The psychologist noted she's highly intelligent, understands consequences, but believes laws shouldn't apply to her because she's special. Classic narcissistic thinking, but not insanity. What about Mom? I asked. Her evaluation is scheduled for next week, but her lawyer is already preparing a defense that she was manipulated by Meredith. Santos shook her head. Hard to sell when she was actively recruiting victims and managing finances. That evening, I attended another Al-Anon meeting. Word had spread about my situation and the group had grown. Other healthcare workers facing similar family dynamics had joined. My brother sells fake COVID cures online, one nurse shared. Says his herbs work better than vaccines. I reported him to the FDA and now my family won't speak to me. My mother performed surgery in her garage, another said. She was a nurse 30 years ago, thinks that qualifies her. I've called authorities multiple times, but she keeps moving, finding new desperate people. We were a club no one wanted to join, healthcare workers whose families had weaponized medical knowledge for profit and ego. After the meeting, Margaret Winters approached with another woman. This is Dr. Patricia Chen, she said. James Chen's sister. She wanted to meet you. I braced for anger, but Dr. Chen's eyes held only sadness. Thank you for speaking out. My brother was stubborn about doctors, but he trusted your mother from church. If you hadn't come forward, we'd never have known the truth about his death. "I'm so sorry for your loss." I said the words feeling inadequate. "I'm angry," she admitted, furious that charlatans took advantage of his fears. "But I'm grateful too. Your courage means other families won't suffer like ours." She handed me an envelope. "My family wrote a letter supporting your position. We want the court to know we don't blame you for your family's crimes. You're a victim too." As she left, Margaret squeezed my shoulder. "That's what I learned all those years ago. The real family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand with you for truth, even when it costs everything." My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Against better judgment, I opened it. It was from someone claiming to be part of Alternative Healers United, but instead of threats, it was a confession. "Your sister trained me. I thought I was helping people. Then my neighbor's kid almost died from pills I gave her. I'm turning myself in tomorrow, sending you this so you know. You're right to stand against them. Some of us were fooled too. Don't let their poison spread further." I forwarded it to Detective Washington, then sat in my car processing the day's revelations. My mother and sister hadn't just crossed ethical lines. They'd obliterated them. They'd built a criminal empire on the suffering of others while wearing the mask of healers. But their exposure was creating ripples. Victims were finding voices. Other fake healers were reconsidering. The truth was spreading like antibiotics fighting infection. My phone rang, Mrs. Harmon. "I wanted you to know the hospital board met today. They're creating a fund for victims of medical fraud named after James Chen. They want you on the advisory committee." "I don't know if I'm qualified." "You're uniquely qualified. You understand how predators exploit trust and medical ignorance. You can help us educate vulnerable populations." After we hung up, I looked at the hospital glowing in the evening light. Inside, real healing was happening. Qualified professionals were saving lives with knowledge and compassion. Outside, predators like my family were still hunting, but their shadows were shrinking. Each testimony, each exposed lie, each saved life pushed back against their darkness. I thought about Mr. Patterson, my cardiac patient, who'd mentioned throwing out suspicious remedies after hearing my story. About Mrs. Rodriguez, whose kidneys were healing now that she was free from toxic help. About future victims who might be saved because people were learning to question, to verify, to demand real credentials. My family had chosen to be predators. I'd chosen to be protection. And every day as I put on my legitimate scrubs and cared for patients with real knowledge, I proved that healing and harming were choices. I'd made mine, and I'd keep making it every day no matter how much it hurt. Because that's what real nurses do. We choose healing even when it means healing the wounds our own families created. 6 weeks had passed since the indictment hearing. I'd settled into a routine of working attending court preparation meetings and trying to rebuild some semblance of normal life. The trial date was set for 3 months out, giving both sides time to prepare what promised to be a complex case. I was finishing my Thursday night shift updating patient charts in the cardiac unit when my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Detective Washington. "Major development. Can you come to the station after your shift? Bring your father if possible." 2 hours later, Dad and I sat across from Detective Washington and Assistant U.S. Attorney Santos. The detective's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of exhaustion and something else: disgust. "We arrested 14 more members of Alternative Healers United last night," he began. "Coordinated raids across 3 states. What we found..." He paused, rubbing his temples. "Your sister wasn't just a member. She was a founder. The whole network traces back to her and 2 others who met in online forums for failed medical students." Santos opened a folder filled with screenshots and documents. They called themselves the Trinity. Your sister Marcus Webb, who failed out of med school for selling drugs, and Jennifer Lawson, who lost her nursing license for patient abuse. Together, they built a network specifically designed to prey on vulnerable populations. "How organized was it?" Dad asked, though he looked like he didn't want to know the answer. "Very. They had territories, shared resources, even a training manual your sister wrote." Santos pulled out a bound document, Liberation Medicine, a guide to healing outside the system. It's essentially a how-to guide for medical fraud. I flipped through pages filled with Meredith's familiar handwriting, chapters on forging documents, gaining patient trust, which medications to steal, how to explain away adverse reactions. It was a predator's handbook disguised as alternative medicine philosophy. "This is evidence of conspiracy," Detective Washington said. "But that's not why we called you here. During the raids, we found something else. Marcus Webb kept records of every transaction, every victim, including video recordings of some consultations." My stomach dropped. Video. He was paranoid about being betrayed, so he secretly recorded meetings, including one from last year where your sister and mother discussed. He paused, looking uncomfortable. Discussed using you as a potential fall person if things went bad. He pulled out a tablet and hit play. The video was grainy but clear enough. Meredith and Mom sat in what looked like Mom's kitchen papers spread between them. "If the feds get too close, we pin the prescriptions on Zoe," Meredith said casually. "She has access to the hospital. We plant some stolen meds in her apartment, forge some documents with her signature. She's so self-righteous no one would believe her denials." "But she's your sister," Mom's voice protested weakly. "She chose the system over family," Meredith replied coldly. "That makes her the enemy. Besides, would you rather see me in prison or her temporarily inconvenienced? She'd probably get off with probation, first offense and all." "I suppose you're right," Mom agreed. "Family protects family, and she clearly doesn't understand that." The video continued with them discussing specific strategies: how to access my apartment, which medications to plant, how to forge my signature convincingly. They'd practiced writing my name, studied my work schedule, even discussed drugging me to make me appear impaired at work. I felt physically ill. While I'd been protecting them, they'd been planning my destruction as casually as planning dinner. "This changes things," Santos said after stopping the video. "This shows clear intent to frame you for their crimes. It upgrades the conspiracy charges and adds attempted obstruction of justice." "There's more," Detective Washington said grimly. "We found videos of actual treatments. I won't show you these. They're evidence and, frankly, disturbing. But your sister performed minor surgeries, drained abscesses, removed moles, even attempted to set a broken bone. No anesthesia beyond stolen lidocaine, no sterile technique, no follow-up care." "She was playing surgeon," Dad asked, horrified. "She had a whole setup in a rented storage unit, called it her treatment center, charged hundreds of dollars cash for procedures that often led to severe infections. 3 people ended up hospitalized with sepsis from her surgeries." "Did any die?" I asked quietly. "One came close. A homeless veteran she treated for an infected wound. Instead of antibiotics, she packed it with herbs and honey. He barely survived the resulting blood infection." Santos pulled out more documents. "Your mother wasn't just recruiting patients. She was scheduling these procedures, collecting payment, even assisting sometimes. We have her on video holding instruments while Meredith cut into people. The scope of horror kept expanding. My sister hadn't just been playing with pills. She'd been butchering people in a storage unit while Mom helped." "Why didn't these people go to real hospitals?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "No insurance, fear of deportation warrant issues, or just desperation," Detective Washington explained. "Your sister specifically targeted people who couldn't or wouldn't seek legitimate care. The vulnerable and voiceless. Classic predator behavior." "What happens now?" Dad asked. "Given this new evidence, we're adding attempted murder charges for the surgical victims conspiracy to obstruct justice for the plan to frame Zoe, and federal racketeering charges that could result in life imprisonment." Santos's voice was hard. "Your sister and mother are looking at dying in prison if convicted on all counts." "What about bail?" I asked. "Mom's still out." Detective Washington's expression darkened. "About that, we can't find her. She didn't show up for her check-in yesterday. Her ankle monitor was found cut off at a rest stop 50 miles north. We have a federal warrant out for her arrest." Mom was on the run. The woman who'd raised me, who'd made my school lunches and attended my concerts, was now a federal fugitive. We've frozen all known accounts and flagged her passport, but he trailed off. But you think someone's helping her? I finished. The Alternative Healers Network is extensive. She could be hiding with any of dozens of sympathizers. We're monitoring communications, but these people learned to be careful after the arrests. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that simply read, "Check your email." With trembling fingers, I opened my email to find a message from Mom's account. Zoe, by the time you read this, I'll be somewhere you and your government handlers can't reach. You've destroyed everything. Your sister, our family, the movement to help people failed by corrupt medicine. I know you think you're some kind of hero, but you're a traitor. You chose them over us. You put your own sister in a cage and helped them hunt down people whose only crime was caring too much. Meredith was special. She saw beyond the lies of big pharma and corporate medicine. She helped people everyone else abandoned. And you destroyed her out of jealousy and spite. I'll never forgive you. When Meredith gets out, and she will because truth always wins, we'll rebuild. The movement will continue. People need what we offer, what you're too brainwashed to understand. Don't try to find me. You're no daughter of mine. You killed that relationship when you betrayed blood for a paycheck and approval from your corporate masters. Remember this: every person who suffers because they can't afford your precious, legitimate health care is on your hands now. You protected the system that kills thousands through neglect and greed. I hope your scrubs feel like chains. Linda. I read it twice, each word a calculated wound. Even facing federal charges, even caught on video planning to frame me, she maintained the delusion. In her world, they were heroes, and I was the villain. Forward that to us, Detective Washington said gently. It's evidence and might help us track her. As I did, another email arrived. This one had no words, just a photo attachment. I opened it to find a picture of Mom standing in front of a mobile home somewhere rural mountains in the background. She was smiling, holding a sign, "The healing continues." She's taunting us, Santos said, studying the image. But she made a mistake. Those mountains, that vegetation, narrows down the location significantly. While they analyzed the photo, I sat with the weight of complete family destruction. My sister faced life in prison. My mother was a federal fugitive. My father was divorcing a ghost, and I was the star witness in their downfall. You did the right thing, Dad said, quietly reading my expression. They made their choices. You made yours. The only difference is yours saves lives, while theirs ended them. Mrs. Harmon had said something similar weeks ago. Sometimes the family we choose through shared values matters more than the family we're born into. There's one more thing, Detective Washington said. We need to put you in protective custody until we find your mother. With her on the run and the network still partially active, you could be in danger. I can't stop working, I protested. My patients need consistency. We can arrange security at the hospital, Santos offered. But you'll need to vary your routines, possibly relocate temporarily. These people have already shown willingness to kill. We can't risk them targeting you. As we discussed logistics, my phone rang. An unknown number, but Detective Washington nodded for me to answer while he traced it. Hello, Zoe. The voice was familiar, but panicked. It's Jennifer Lawson from the Trinity. I know you don't know me, but I need to turn myself in. I can't do this anymore. Marcus got arrested, your mom's gone crazy, and I just watched a kid almost die from pills I gave him. I want out. I looked at Detective Washington, who was gesturing for me to keep her talking. Where are you, Jennifer? Motel outside Burlington. I have evidence. Recordings, documents, everything. But I'm scared. Your mom's been calling saying we need to eliminate problems. I think she means you. We can protect you, I said, following Detective Washington's hand signals. Tell me where exactly. We'll come get you. She gave me the address, crying now. I never meant for it to go this far. We were just angry about failing, wanted to prove we knew better. But then people started getting hurt, and the money was so good, and your sister kept saying we were revolutionaries. Stay where you are, I said. Lock the door. Help is coming. After hanging up, the room burst into activity. Detective Washington called units to Jennifer's location, while Santos prepared witness protection paperwork. If she Flips provides testimony about the inner workings, this case becomes ironclad, Santos explained. Your sister and mother won't have any defense left. 3 hours later, we received word. Jennifer was in custody along with 2 boxes of evidence, including recordings of planning sessions, where my sister detailed exactly how to exploit desperate people for maximum profit. She wasn't a believer, Detective Washington explained after initial questioning. She was a con artist who found the perfect mark, people who desperately wanted to believe alternative medicine could save them. Your sister provided the delusion, but Jennifer provided the business model. The betrayal went deeper than ideology. It was calculated predation wrapped in the flag of medical freedom. That night, in a safe house arranged by the FBI, I lay awake thinking about the video of Mom and Meredith planning to frame me, the casual cruelty of it, the easy willingness to destroy me to save themselves. I'd protected them for so long, made excuses, kept secrets, and they'd been willing to send me to prison as a backup plan. But their plan had failed. Their network was crumbling. Their victims were finding justice. And somewhere in the darkness, Mom was running, but she couldn't run from the truth forever. The arrest was over. The trial was coming. And I would testify to every single crime, no matter how much it hurt. Because that's what you do when family becomes predator. You become prey no more. The safe house was a modest apartment in a quiet suburb 40 minutes from my usual life. Plain furniture, basic necessities, and FBI agents rotating shifts in unmarked cars outside. I'd been there a week when Detective Washington arrived with news. "We found your mother," he said, setting down a folder of photographs. "She was hiding at a compound in Montana run by an anti-government group that believes modern medicine is population control. They call themselves sovereign healers." The photos showed Mom being led away in handcuffs, looking haggard but defiant. Behind her, FBI agents were carrying boxes of evidence from a building labeled Natural Freedom Clinic. She wasn't just hiding, Detective Washington continued. She was actively practicing, setting up a new network with the group there. We found prescription pads, stolen medications, even plans to expand operations to 3 neighboring states. She couldn't stop, I said, not really surprised. Even facing federal charges, she had to keep playing doctor. It's worse than that. The group she was with, they're connected to militia movements. Anti-vaccine, anti-government, convinced that medical licensing is tyranny. Your mother was becoming their medical coordinator, planning to train others in what she called liberation healing. Dad, who'd been staying in his own protective custody arrangement, looked older than his years. Linda always had to be part of something bigger than herself. I guess domestic terrorism was the natural evolution. Santos arrived with more updates. Jennifer Lawson has been extremely cooperative. She's provided recordings, documents, even passwords to encrypted communications. Your sister's trial is going to be devastating for the defense. What about Mom's new charges, I asked. Federal flight violating bail conditions operating across state lines, and now potential terrorism charges for planning to attack medical facilities with the militia group. She paused. She's looking at life without parole if convicted on everything. That evening, I was allowed a supervised video call with Mrs. Harmon. The hospital had been supportive beyond my expectations, holding my position and providing security for when I could return. "Your patients ask about you constantly," she said warmly. "Mr. Patterson says to tell you he's following all medical advice to the letter. No more internet remedies." "How's the hospital handling the publicity?" I asked. The media attention had been intense after Mom's capture. "We're using it as an educational opportunity. The James Chen Memorial Fund has raised over $200,000 for medical fraud victim support. We're creating programs to help vulnerable populations identify fake medical practitioners," She smiled. "You've turned a personal tragedy into public good." "I just told the truth," I said. Sometimes that's the most revolutionary act of all. After the call, I sat with the weight of change. In trying to destroy me, my family had created a movement against medical fraud. Their victims were finding voices. Other fake healers were being exposed. The darkness they'd operated in was flooded with light. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I recognized. Diane Morrison, Mom's friend, who'd hidden evidence. "I'm sorry," it read. "I believed their lies about helping people. I see now what they really were. I'm testifying for the prosecution. Your mother used my trust to hurt people. That's unforgivable." Another ally from unexpected places. Mom's network of enablers was becoming a network of witnesses against her. Detective Washington returned the next day with Jennifer Lawson's full confession. Reading it was like seeing inside my sister's mind through a dark mirror. Meredith was brilliant at manipulation, Jennifer had stated. She could make you believe that laws were just suggestions, that credentials were oppression, that causing harm was actually healing if you framed it right. She'd say things like, "Sometimes the body needs trauma to remember how to heal itself," when patients had adverse reactions. The confession detailed their recruitment strategies, targeting angry, failed medical students and healthcare workers who'd lost licenses. They specifically looked for people with just enough knowledge to be dangerous, but not enough wisdom to be safe. "She turned our failures into weapons," Jennifer said. "Made us believe we were special, misunderstood, held back by jealous establishments. Then she aimed us at vulnerable people like guided missiles." There were financial details, too. The network had made over $3 million in 2 years. Money laundered through fake wellness centers, supplement companies, and educational workshops where they trained others in their methods. "Your sister talked about franchising," Jennifer revealed, "making Alternative Healers United into a nationwide movement. She had plans for merchandise, a documentary, even a book deal. She saw herself as a guru, not a criminal." But the most damning parts were about the victims. Jennifer estimated at least 200 people had been seriously harmed, with potentially dozens of deaths they'd attributed to healing crises or natural transitions. When James Chen died, Meredith called it an acceptable loss in the revolution, Jennifer stated. She said all movements had martyrs. I had to stop reading several times, overwhelmed by the callousness. This wasn't misguided helping. This was systematic predation with a body count. That night, unable to sleep, I wrote in the journal my therapist had recommended. "I keep looking for the sister I remember, the one who bandaged my stuffed animals and declared them healed, the one who wanted to help people so badly she cried when she couldn't save an injured bird. But maybe that person never existed, or maybe she got lost so gradually I didn't notice until she was gone completely." Mom's arrest photos haunt me. She looked proud, like she was being persecuted for righteousness rather than prosecuted for crimes. Even caught red-handed, she clings to the delusion. I wonder if she even remembers who we used to be before the lies consumed everything. Dad asked me yesterday if I regret starting this by reporting Meredith. I don't. Every day brings news of another victim, found another fake healer, exposed another vulnerable person saved from their predation. My family chose to be a cancer. I chose to be treatment. It hurts, but healing often does. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A secure video call connected me with 3 women I'd never met, but instantly recognized. The other witnesses against my family. "We wanted to thank you," Mrs. Chen said, James's widow. "Your courage gave us courage. Your voice gave us voices." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded from her wheelchair. "My daughter says my kidney function is improving. The doctors think I might avoid permanent dialysis. That's because of you speaking truth." The third woman introduced herself as Patricia Hoffman, mother of the teenager whose diabetes had been mismanaged by Meredith. "My son is alive because you stood up. He's back on proper insulin, back in school, talking about becoming a real doctor to help kids like him." "We're all testifying," Mrs. Chen continued. "All the victims and families. Your mother and sister won't be able to deny the harm they caused when dozens of us speak truth. After they logged off, I sat with the strange comfort of shared purpose. My biological family was gone, but something new was forming. Bonds forged by truth and survival, by choosing justice over comfortable lies. Detective Washington arrived that afternoon with final preparation materials for the trial now just 2 weeks away. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, videos, confessions, victims, and the damning manual my sister had written. The defense is trying for an insanity plea, he explained, claiming your sister suffered from delusional disorder, genuinely believing she was helping. Will it work? Not with Jennifer's testimony and the financial evidence. Hard to claim insanity when you're carefully laundering money and planning to frame your sister for crimes. He paused. Your testimony will be crucial. You knew her before and during. You can speak to her capacity for manipulation versus delusion. She knew, I said firmly. Maybe she convinced herself it was justified, but she knew. The video of her planning to frame me proves it. You don't frame someone for crimes you genuinely believe are heroic acts. That evening, the FBI allowed me a supervised visit to my apartment to collect belongings. The place felt foreign, like a museum of who I used to be. My scrubs hung in the closet, waiting for their owner to return. Medical textbooks lined shelves, testament to the legitimate education my sister had scorned. In my mailbox among bills and junk mail was a letter with no return address. Inside, my sister's handwriting. Zoe, by the time you read this, you'll have destroyed everything I built. I hope you're satisfied. You always were the good one, the rule follower, the one who colored inside the lines. I tried to show you there was freedom outside those lines, but you chose chains instead. They'll paint me as a monster and you as a hero, but we both know the truth. I helped people you'd have let die in emergency room waiting areas. I gave hope to the hopeless while you gave them bills they couldn't pay. When I get out, and I will because truth always wins, I'll rebuild. There are thousands who believe in what we started. You can cage my body, but not the movement. Natural healing will prevail over your pharmaceutical slavery. Enjoy your victory. It's temporary. Everything built on lies is. Your sister in blood, if not in spirit, Meredith. I showed it to Detective Washington, who bagged it as evidence. Still playing the victim, he noted. Even facing life in prison, she can't admit fault. She never could, I said. It was always someone else's fault. Failed a test teacher, was biased. Lost a job, boss was threatened. Caught stealing, forced by circumstances. I think accountability physically pains her. 2 days before the trial, I was cleared to return to work with security. Walking into Riverside General felt like coming home. My colleagues embraced me. Patients welcomed me back, and for 12 hours I remembered why I'd chosen legitimate medicine over my family's dangerous fantasies. You look good, Mr. Patterson said during rounds. Stronger. Like you've been through fire and survived. Something like that. I agreed, checking his chart. His numbers were excellent, his recovery on track. You know what's funny? He said. I used to think doctors and nurses were just in it for money. Your sister's story made me realize the real ones could make more money doing fake medicine with less accountability. You choose the hard path because it's right, not profitable. That night, Dad called with his own pre-trial thoughts. I've been thinking about when you girls were young, he said. You'd play hospital for hours, but even then there were differences. You'd carefully check your stuffed animals' symptoms, give them pretend medicine on schedule. Meredith would declare them cured with magic touches and get angry when you said healing took time. I remember, I said softly. I should have seen it then. The need for instant gratification for being special without effort. But I was too busy keeping peace to notice the patterns. He sighed. I failed you both in different ways. Her by enabling you by not protecting. We all did our best with what we knew then, I said. What matters is what we do with what we know now. Testify, he said firmly. Tell every truth, no matter how much it hurts. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall. The next morning, I stood before my bathroom mirror in my safe house, practicing my testimony one final time. Tomorrow, I would face my sister in court. I would speak truths that would likely send her to prison forever. But I would also speak for Mrs. Rodriguez's kidneys, for James Chen's daughters, for Patricia Hoffman's diabetic son, for all the nameless victims who suffered, because my family chose to play God with people's lives. I put on my scrubs. Clean, legitimate, earned through years of actual education. They weren't chains like Mom claimed. They were armor protecting both me and my patients from the kind of harm my family inflicted. Tomorrow the trial would begin. Today I stood strong in my truth, surrounded by chosen family who valued healing over harming facts, over fantasies, and justice over blood. The little girl who'd carefully tended stuffed animals had grown up to tend real humans, while her sister had grown up to prey on them. We'd both made our choices. Now justice would make its own. The federal courthouse buzzed with media attention as the most anticipated trial of the year began. News vans lined the street, reporters doing stand-ups about the fake healer network that had captured national attention. I arrived in an unmarked FBI vehicle, slipping through a side entrance to avoid the circus. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat the victims and their families, a sea of faces marked by betrayal and loss. On the other, a smaller but vocal group of Alternative Healers United supporters, still clinging to the delusion that their leaders were martyrs. Meredith entered in shackles, wearing a conservative suit that couldn't hide how prison had changed her. She'd lost weight. Her hair was severely pulled back, but her eyes still burned with self-righteous fury. She found me in the gallery and stared, her lips moving in what looked like traitor. Mom was brought in separately, also shackled, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who'd once commanded church committees and social clubs now shuffled like she'd aged 20 years in 2 months. She didn't look at me at all. Judge Kovach called the court to order, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Santos began with an opening statement that laid out the scope of devastation. The defendants didn't just pretend to be medical professionals, she said, standing before the jury. They built a criminal empire on the suffering of society's most vulnerable. They targeted the elderly, the poor, the desperate. They promised healing and delivered harm, hope, and delivered death. She presented the numbers: over 300 identified victims across 7 states, 43 hospitalizations directly linked to their treatments, 4 confirmed deaths with potentially dozens more being investigated. This wasn't misguided alternative medicine, Santos continued. This was calculated predation. The defendants kept detailed records of their victims' finances, their fears, their isolation from family. They knew exactly who to target and how to exploit them. The defense attorney, a well-known advocate for medical freedom named Richard Morse, painted a different picture. My clients are healers persecuted by a system that prioritizes profit over people, he argued. They saw suffering the medical establishment ignored and tried to help. Yes, they made mistakes, but mistakes born of compassion aren't crimes. Objection, Santos said. Counsel is arguing facts, not in evidence. Sustained, Judge Kovach ruled. Mr. Morse, save your characterizations for closing arguments. The first week of testimony was devastating. Victim after victim took the stand, each story a portrait of trust betrayed. Mrs. Rodriguez testified from her wheelchair about the kidney damage from NSAIDs my sister prescribed, despite knowing her condition. She said the pain relief would improve my quality of life. She never mentioned it might end my life. James Chen's widow could barely speak through tears as she described her husband's final days. He trusted them because they said they understood his fear of hospitals. They used his trauma from his father's death against him. Now my daughters have the same trauma from losing their father. Patricia Hoffman's son, now 17 and healthy, spoke about nearly dying from diabetic ketoacidosis. They told my mom insulin was poison, that their herbs would cure me naturally. I was in a coma for 3 days. I missed my sophomore year recovering. But it was Mrs. Hutchins, the elderly woman with dementia, who provided the most heartbreaking testimony. Her daughter had to speak for her as the drug interaction had worsened her cognitive decline. "My mother doesn't remember my name most days," she said, "but she remembers the nice lady who gave her pills that would help her feel better. She asks for her, sometimes wants to thank her for being so kind." Through each testimony, Meredith sat unmoved, occasionally shaking her head or whispering to her lawyer. Mom kept her eyes down, but I could see her hands trembling. When Jennifer Lawson took the stand as the prosecution's star witness, the courtroom went silent. Her testimony over 3 days laid bare the entire operation. "Meredith called us soldiers in the war against medical tyranny," she testified. She said some casualties were inevitable in any revolution. When patients died or were harmed, she'd say they were martyrs to the cause. She produced recordings of planning sessions where my sister discussed targeting specific demographics, maximizing profit, and avoiding detection. In one chilling excerpt, Meredith could be heard saying, "The beautiful thing about the desperate is they'll believe anything if you say it with enough conviction." "Did the defendant know she was causing harm?" Santos asked. "She knew," Jennifer said firmly. "She kept what she called outcome files, tracking who got better, who got worse, who died. She used the data to refine her approaches, not to help people, but to avoid getting caught." The defense tried to discredit Jennifer as a bitter conspirator trying to reduce her own sentence, but the evidence spoke louder than their objections. Then came my turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking through molasses. Every step was heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and looked directly at my sister for the first time since the trial began. "State your name for the record," Santos prompted. "Zoe Sullivan. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside General Hospital and the defendant, Meredith Sullivan's sister." For 2 days, I testified about our childhood, her dismissal from nursing school, the escalation of her behavior, and the destruction she'd wrought on our family and countless others. "Did your sister ever express doubt about her methods?" Santos asked. "No," I said clearly. She was absolutely convinced she was right and everyone else was wrong. When confronted with evidence of harm, she'd blame the patient for not following directions or having weak constitution. It was never her fault. "Tell us about the video where she discussed framing you." I recounted watching my sister and mother plan my destruction, their casual willingness to sacrifice me to save themselves. Several jurors looked shocked. The supporters section grew quieter. "How did that make you feel?" "Like I never knew them at all," I admitted. "Like the family I thought I had was a fiction and these strangers had been wearing their faces all along." The defense's cross-examination was brutal. Morse tried to paint me as jealous, vindictive, mentally unstable from work stress. "Isn't it true you were always competing with your sister?" he pressed. "No," I said firmly. "I was surviving while she was enabled. There's a difference between competition and self-preservation." "You sent your own mother to prison," he accused. "My mother sent herself to prison by committing crimes," I corrected. "I just stopped lying about it." He tried every angle, suggesting I'd planted evidence that I'd manipulated my father, that I was seeking fame from the case. Each accusation fell flat against the mountain of evidence. When Mom took the stand in her own defense, she broke my heart all over again. "I believed in my daughter's gift," she said, voice quavering. "Maybe I was wrong, but what mother doesn't want to believe her child is special? I never meant for anyone to get hurt." But under Santos's cross-examination, the truth emerged. Email after email showed her actively recruiting victims, managing finances, planning expansion. When confronted with the evidence of James Chen's death, a man she'd known from church for a decade, she broke down. "I thought he just needed someone to listen." She sobbed. "Meredith said she could help his diabetes naturally. I didn't know. I couldn't have known." "You knew she wasn't licensed," Santos pressed. "You knew the medications were stolen. You knew people were being harmed. Yet you continued recruiting victims. Why?" "Because I'd already sacrificed everything." Mom burst out. My reputation, my relationships, my other daughter. If I admitted Meredith was wrong, what had it all been for? The admission hung in the air. She'd known the truth but chose the lie because the cost of honesty was too high. Meredith's testimony was a master class in narcissism. She spoke for hours about her theories, her persecution, her noble intentions. Not once did she express remorse for the victims. "Do you feel responsible for James Chen's death?" Santos asked directly. "I feel sad that the medical establishment failed him so thoroughly that he had to seek help outside their system," Meredith replied. "His death is on their hands, not mine." "What about Mrs. Rodriguez's kidney failure?" "She was already sick. I gave her quality of life. Sometimes that's more important than quantity." With each answer, she damned herself further. The jury saw not a misguided healer, but a predator without conscience. After 3 weeks of testimony, closing arguments brought everything full circle. "The defendants want you to believe they're healers," Santos told the jury, "but healers don't prey on the vulnerable. They don't steal identities, forge prescriptions, or plan to frame family members. They don't keep files on who they've killed. They don't build criminal networks spanning multiple states. What the defendants did wasn't healing, it was hunting. And their prey were people who trusted them most." Morse made a passionate plea for understanding, for seeing alternative medicine as valid for recognizing desperation rather than criminality. But his words rang hollow after weeks of devastating evidence. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. "On all counts, guilty." The word echoed through the courtroom 47 times as each charge was read. Meredith stood stoic, but I saw her hands shaking. Mom collapsed, sobbing. Judge Kovac scheduled sentencing for the following month, remanding both defendants to custody as flight risks. As marshals led them away, Meredith turned to look at me one last time. I expected hatred, but instead saw something worse. Pity. "You'll never understand," she mouthed. "Never." She was right. I'd never understand choosing ego over ethics, delusion over truth, harm over healing. And I was grateful for that inability. Outside the courthouse, victims and families gathered. Mrs. Chen hugged me tightly. "Justice," she whispered. "It won't bring James back, but it stops them from taking anyone else." The media wanted statements, but I was done talking. Dad and I slipped away to a quiet restaurant where we sat in exhausted silence. "It's over," he said finally. "The trial is," I corrected. "The healing is just beginning." 2 months later at sentencing, Judge Kovac delivered justice with measured words. The defendants built an empire on suffering while claiming to relieve it. They betrayed the most sacred trust, that between healer and patient. They corrupted family bonds, turning mothers into recruiters and sisters into potential scapegoats. Meredith received life without parole for the racketeering fraud and deaths. Mom got 25 years for her role as accomplice and recruiter. Neither showed remorse. Even facing life in prison, they maintained they were martyrs to a noble cause. 1 year later, I stood before a graduating class of nursing students at my alma mater, invited to speak about ethics in healthcare. The auditorium was packed, these fresh faces, eager to begin their careers in healing. A year ago, my sister was sentenced to life in prison for crimes committed while pretending to be a nurse. I began letting the weight of that statement settle. She believed that wanting to heal was enough, that good intentions justified any action, that formal education was oppression rather than preparation. I could see some students shifting uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing their own moments of frustration with difficult coursework or demanding instructors. Every pharmacology exam you've stressed over, every clinical hour you've completed, every care plan you've meticulously written, these aren't hurdles to prevent you from helping people. They're tools to ensure you can help safely, effectively, and ethically. I told them about Mrs. Rodriguez, whose kidney function had finally stabilized after months of proper treatment. About Patricia Hoffman's son, now a pre-med student, determined to become the kind of doctor who listens to patients while maintaining medical standards. about the dozens of victims who'd found their voices through the trial. The difference between healing and harming often comes down to knowledge, humility, and accountability. I continued. My sister had none of these. She had certainty without competence, pride without preparation and excuses, instead of ethics. After my speech, Professor Coleman found me in the hallway. She'd aged visibly since the trial, carrying the weight of having taught both miracle and monster. That was powerful, she said. I've made it required viewing for all my ethics classes. Students need to understand that good intentions without proper knowledge are just another form of harm. We walked to her office where she showed me letters from nursing programs across the country. The case had sparked a national conversation about medical fraud leading to stricter verification systems and better education about identifying fake practitioners. Your family's crimes might save more lives than they took, she said gently. Cold comfort, I know, but still. That evening, I attended my monthly support group meeting. Healthcare workers dealing with family members who'd committed medical fraud. Our small group had grown to 15 each with our own story of choosing professional ethics over family loyalty. My brother's parole hearing is next week. Shared Maria, an ER doctor whose brother had sold fake cancer cures. He wants me to testify that he's reformed, but his letters are still full of conspiracy theories about big pharma. How do you know when someone's really changed versus just saying what they need to for freedom? You look at actions, not words, suggested Tom, a pharmacist whose mother had run an illegal pill mill. My mom says all the right things now, but she still refers to her victims as customers. Real change means acknowledging harm, not just regretting consequences. I thought about Meredith's letters from prison, monthly missives that alternated between begging for forgiveness and raging about persecution. Mom had stopped writing after 6 months when I'd refused to petition for her early release. Sometimes they don't change, I offered. Sometimes the best we can do is accept that the person we loved and the person they became are irreconcilable. We mourn the first while protecting others from the second. After the meeting, I drove to Riverside General for my shift. I'd been promoted to charge nurse of the cardiac unit, finding purpose in legitimate healing. Mrs. Harmon had become a mentor and friend, guiding me through the complex journey of rebuilding life after public family destruction. How was the speech? She asked during our shift overlap. Hard but necessary. Those students need to understand that shortcuts in medicine lead to graveyards, not acclaim. Speaking of education, I have a proposition, she said, pulling out a folder. The hospital board approved funding for a new position, Medical Fraud Prevention Coordinator, someone to educate vulnerable populations about identifying legitimate versus fraudulent practitioners. Interested? I stared at the job description. It would mean reducing my bedside nursing hours, but potentially preventing hundreds from falling victim to predators like my family. Can I think about it? Of course. But Zoe, you're uniquely qualified. You understand both sides, the legitimate medical world and how fraudsters exploit people's fears and desperation. That insight could save lives. That night, I found Dad at home working on his laptop. Since the divorce was finalized, he'd thrown himself into volunteer work with a nonprofit that helped elderly people navigate healthcare systems safely. Look at this, he said, showing me a presentation. We're creating a checklist for seniors to verify medical credentials. Simple stuff. How to check license numbers, red flags to watch for questions to ask. Your testimony inspired this. How do you do it? I asked. How do you take something so painful and turn it into purpose? He closed the laptop and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, but somehow maintained kindness. Because wallowing helps no one. Your mother and sister chose destruction. We can choose construction, build something better from the ashes. Mrs. Harmon offered me a job educating people about medical fraud, I told him. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Part of me wants to leave it all behind, just focus on my patients and pretend the last 2 years didn't happen. But they did happen, he said gently. And because they did, you have knowledge others need. The question is, what's the best use of that knowledge? That weekend, I visited James Chen's grave with his widow and daughters. It had become a quarterly ritual, a way to remember why the fight against medical fraud mattered. He would have been 54 today, Mrs. Chen said, placing fresh flowers. The girls are doing well. Honor roll soccer championships. He would have been so proud. Mom's teaching us to ask questions now, the older daughter, Sophie, added. To verify everything, even when people seem nice. She says trust should be earned with credentials, not just kindness. Your father's death is teaching others to live more safely, I told them. It's not fair or right, but it's something. Auntie Zoe, the younger daughter Lisa, asked, "Why did your sister hurt people?" I'd struggled with this question for 2 years. I think she got lost. She wanted to be special so badly that she convinced herself lies were truth and harm was help. When people told her she was wrong, she decided they were enemies rather than accepting she needed to change. That's sad, Lisa said simply. Yes, I agreed. It is. Driving home, I made my decision. I called Mrs. Harmon. I'll take the position, I said, but I want to keep some clinical hours. I need to remember why real medicine matters while teaching others to identify fake versions. Done, she said immediately. We'll create a hybrid role. Welcome to the next phase of your career, Zoe. That night, I sat at my computer drafting my first presentation for the new role. I thought about all the victims who'd testified the families destroyed the trust, betrayed. But I also thought about the students eager to learn the elderly people Dad was protecting, the future victims who might be saved. My phone buzzed with a notification from the prison email system. Another letter from Meredith. I almost deleted it unread, then decided to face whatever manipulation she'd crafted this time. Zoe, they're medicating me here against my will, forcing their chemicals into my body to stabilize me. Now you've won completely. I'm just another victim of the system I tried to fight. But I want you to know something. In my unit, there are women who've never had anyone listen to their health concerns. I teach them about their bodies, about advocating for themselves. Even in chains, I'm still a healer. You can cage my body, but not my purpose. Every woman I help in here is proof that my way works. Natural healing, human connection, treating the whole person. These things matter more than your licenses and protocols. One day, when the world wakes up to the medical industrial complex's crimes, they'll see I was right. Until then, I'll continue my work wherever I am. Your sister, whether you acknowledge it or not, Meredith. Still playing the martyr, still convinced she was a misunderstood hero, still unable to see that teaching medical advocacy and practicing fraudulent medicine were entirely different things. I archived the email without responding. Some delusions were too deep to cure. The next morning, I presented my medical fraud prevention program to the hospital board. Using case studies from the trial with names changed, I outlined how predators like my sister identified and exploited victims. They look for isolation, desperation, and distrust of traditional medicine, I explained. They offer simple solutions to complex problems, blame the medical system for all suffering, and gradually separate victims from support systems that might question their methods. How do we combat this without driving people further from legitimate care? One board member asked. By acknowledging the real failures of our healthcare system while distinguishing them from criminal exploitation. Yes, medical care is expensive. Yes, doctors sometimes dismiss concerns. Yes, the system has flaws, but those flaws don't justify turning to fraudsters who compound suffering while claiming to relieve it. The program was approved unanimously. Within a month, I was speaking at community centers, senior homes, and churches, the same venues my mother had used to recruit victims. At one such presentation, an elderly man raised his hand. I bought pills from your sister, he admitted. For my arthritis. They helped at first, but then I started feeling sick. When I saw the news about her arrest, I threw them away and went to a real doctor. Turns out she'd been giving me stolen steroids. Could have killed me. Thank you for sharing that, I said. Your story might convince others to seek proper help. Afterwards, he approached me privately. I'm sorry about your family. Must be hard doing this work when it's so personal. It's hard, I agreed, but necessary. Every person who learns to verify credentials, every victim who finds real help, every fake healer exposed, it's all worth it. 6 months into my new role, the impact was measurable. Reports of medical fraud in our region dropped by 30%. 3 fake practitioners were arrested based on tips from educated community members. Dozens of people came forward seeking legitimate care after years of dangerous alternatives. Dad's nonprofit expanded statewide, creating a network of advocates helping vulnerable populations navigate healthcare safely. We often presented together father and daughter united in preventing the kind of harm that had destroyed our family. One evening, after a particularly successful community presentation, we sat in a diner celebrating small victories. "Your mother called me," he said quietly, "from prison, wanted me to put money in her commissary account." "Did you?" "No, I told her to ask her supporters, the ones who still think she's a martyr." She hung up on me. He smiled sadly. 25 years of marriage, and it ends with a collect call asking for money to buy ramen noodles. "Do you ever regret it? The divorce, the testimony, all of it?" "I regret not acting sooner," he said. "I regret every victim who suffered while I kept silent, but leaving her protecting others from her never." My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Hoffman. Her son, now thriving in pre-med, had started a student organization focused on medical ethics and fraud prevention. They wanted me to speak at their inaugural meeting. "Look at that," Dad said, reading over my shoulder. "Your sister tried to kill that boy with ignorance. Now he's dedicating his life to spreading knowledge. That's real healing, Zoe. That's redemption." As I drove home that night, I thought about cycles, how harm could perpetuate or be transformed into healing. My family had chosen to spread suffering like a virus, but their victims and I were choosing to be antibodies, strengthening the system against future infections. My scrubs no longer felt like chains, as Mom had predicted. They felt like armor in a battle between legitimate medicine and dangerous pretenders. Every day I wore them was a choice: to heal rather than harm, to build rather than destroy, to tell truth rather than comfortable lies. The little girl who'd carefully tended stuffed animals had found her purpose, not despite her family's crimes, but because of them. Their darkness had illuminated the importance of light. And so I carried on one presentation at a time, one patient at a time, one truth at a time, building a better world from the ashes of the one my family had tried to burn down. 5 years had passed since that morning when Meredith destroyed my scrubs and my family imploded. 5 years of rebuilding, healing, and purposeful work. I stood in my office at Riverside General, now expanded to include a small team dedicated to medical fraud prevention, looking at the framed photo on my wall. The destroyed scrubs mounted like art with a plaque reading, "Where Courage Begins." It was Mrs. Harmon's retirement gift to me when she'd stepped down as head nurse, passing the torch to a new generation. "Never forget," she'd said, "that sometimes the worst moments create the best outcomes." A knock on my door interrupted my reflection. "Come in," I called. A young woman entered hesitantly, looking nervous but determined. "Miss Sullivan, I'm Emma Watson. I start nursing school next month, and I wanted to thank you personally." "Thank me for what?" I asked, gesturing for her to sit. "My grandmother was one of your sister's victims. She gave her pills that nearly shut down her liver. But after your testimony after the trial, Grandma got real help. She lived 3 more years because of you speaking out. Good years where she saw me graduate high school and get into nursing school." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I'm becoming a nurse because I want to be the legitimate healer your sister pretended to be." We talked for an hour about her plans, her fears, her determination to bring real healing to underserved communities. As she left, she paused at the door. "Is it true you're teaching at the nursing school now?" "Just guest lectures on medical ethics and fraud prevention," I confirmed. "Professor Coleman convinced me students need to hear from someone who's seen the consequences of shortcuts. "I'll be in that class," Emma said firmly. "I want to learn everything about doing this right." After she left, I prepared for my afternoon, a special session at the state correctional facility. Not Meredith's prison, but another one where inmates were preparing for release. The warden had requested my fraud prevention program, concerned about vulnerable ex-prisoners falling victim to medical scams. As I drove to the facility, I thought about the irony. My sister sat in one prison while I educated people in another, both of us teaching but with vastly different messages and outcomes. The session went well with engaged questions and genuine concern from attendees. One woman approached afterwards. "I knew your sister," she said quietly. "Did 2 years with her before getting transferred. She runs a whole thing in there, teaching yoga nutrition, telling everyone how the medical system failed them." "That sounds like her," I said carefully. "Thing is, she's not wrong about everything. A lot of us in there did get failed by doctors who didn't listen, didn't care. But after seeing what she did outside..." The woman shook her head. "There's a difference between advocating for better care and what she was doing. Thanks for helping us see that line." Driving back, I got a call from Dad. "You'll never guess what happened. Remember that program we started for seniors? The state just approved funding to expand it nationally. We're going to be training advocates in all 50 states. Dad, that's incredible. It gets better. The Chen Family's Foundation is providing half the funding. They want to call it the James Chen Safe Healthcare Initiative. Mrs. Chen says it's the best way to honor his memory, making sure no one else falls victim to fake healers." That evening, I was scheduled for a night shift in the cardiac unit. I'd kept my clinical hours despite my expanded role needing the grounding reality of direct patient care. As I changed into my scrubs, new ones properly earned, legitimately worn, I smiled at how comfortable they felt now. The unit was busy but manageable. I was checking on Mr. Patterson, still my patient after all these years, when he grabbed my hand. "Saw you on the news last week," he said. "That program you're running saved my neighbor. She was about to buy some miracle cure online for her lupus. Remembered your presentation about checking credentials. Turns out it was just expensive water sold by a convicted felon." "I'm glad she was cautious," I said, adjusting his IV. "You know what I appreciate most?" he continued. "You never made us feel stupid for being tempted. You understood why desperate people make desperate choices. That's why your message works. It comes from understanding, not judgment." Midway through my shift, security paged me. There was someone in the lobby insisting on seeing me. I found a middle-aged man waiting, holding a worn folder. "I'm Marcus Webb's brother," he said, and I tensed. Marcus had been one of the Trinity arrested with my sister. "Please, I'm not here to cause trouble. I need your help." We found a quiet corner where he explained. Marcus was getting out in 6 months unrepentant and already planning to restart operations. He's been writing to supporters, setting up new networks. I found these letters when I cleaned out his storage unit. He handed me the folder. "I can't watch him hurt more people. My daughter's diabetic. What if she'd been one of his victims? I need to know how to stop him." I spent an hour walking him through reporting procedures, connecting him with Detective Washington, now heading a federal medical fraud task force, and assuring him that choosing justice over family loyalty wasn't betrayal. It was protection. "Your testimony inspired me," he said as he left. "Seeing you stand up there telling the truth about your own sister, it gave me courage to do the same." Near the end of my shift, I received an unexpected email. The sender was listed as Federal Correctional Institution Coleman, where Meredith was housed, but it wasn't from her. "Dear Miss Sullivan, I am the warden at FCI Coleman where your sister is incarcerated. I'm writing regarding a situation that requires your awareness, though not your action. Your sister has been teaching health classes to fellow inmates. Initially, we allowed this as it seemed harmless: yoga, nutrition, general wellness. However, we've discovered she's been providing medical advice, diagnosing conditions, and suggesting treatments using commissary items as medications. 3 inmates have required medical intervention after following her advice. One woman treated a skin infection with a paste made from coffee and toothpaste, resulting in sepsis. Another stopped taking prescribed psychiatric medication on your sister's advice, leading to a severe psychotic episode. We've banned her from any health-related activities and placed restrictions on her commissary access. However, she continues to find ways to spread her dangerous ideas. I'm informing you not because you bear any responsibility, but because you've become a nationally recognized advocate against medical fraud. We're implementing your prevention program here, hoping to counter your sister's influence. I want you to know that your work is saving lives even in places you might not expect. The inmates who attended your presentation last month were the ones who reported your sister's dangerous activities. Keep fighting the good fight. Sincerely, Warden Patricia Holbrook. I sat with the email for a long time. Even in prison, Meredith couldn't stop. The compulsion to play doctor to endanger others while claiming to help ran too deep. But now there were systems in place to stop her voices, empowered to speak up people who recognized the danger because of education programs I'd helped create. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom's former friend, Diane Morrison. Wanted you to know. I'm volunteering with your dad's program now, teaching others to spot fraud. It's my way of making amends for enabling them. Your mother would hate it, which makes it even more satisfying. The next morning, exhausted from my shift but energized by purpose, I attended the monthly meeting of the James Chen Foundation. The board had asked me to present on expanding fraud prevention into rural communities where isolation and limited medical access made people especially vulnerable. We need community champions, I explained. Local trusted voices who can spread awareness, churches, community centers, libraries, anywhere people gather and share information. Like your mother used to do, but in reverse, one board member observed. Exactly. We're using the same networks that spread harm to now spread protection. After the meeting, Mrs. Chen pulled me aside. James would have been so proud of this. Taking something terrible and transforming it into something that saves lives. That's real healing, Zoe. That afternoon, I had a session with my therapist, something I'd maintained throughout the years, processing the ongoing grief and complicated emotions of losing family to their own choices. I got another letter from Meredith. I told Dr. Martinez. Haven't opened it yet. What stops you? Knowing it'll either be manipulation disguised as apology or rage disguised as righteousness. There's no version where she takes real responsibility. And your mother? Radio silence for 2 years now. Dad heard she's in solitary after trying to organize a prisoner revolt against medical treatment. Apparently, she convinced a dozen women to refuse their medications. How does that make you feel? I considered the question. Sad, but not surprised. They're committed to their delusions even when reality is literally concrete walls and federal charges. But mostly, I feel free. Free to focus on the living rather than mourning the functionally dead. That weekend, I attended Emma Watson's white coat ceremony as she officially began nursing school. Watching her receive that symbol of medical professionalism, I remembered my own ceremony years ago. How proud I'd been how Meredith had refused to attend, claiming it celebrated conformity. Now I understood it celebrated commitment. Commitment to knowledge over intuition, to ethics, over ego, to patience over shortcuts. Everything my sister had rejected in favor of playing pretend with people's lives. Professor Coleman, though retired, still attended these ceremonies. She found me after the event. 63 students this year, she said. The largest class we've ever had. The admissions essays referenced your story repeatedly. Young people who want to be real healers because they saw what fake ones do. Meredith would hate that her legacy is inspiring legitimate medical professionals, I said. Good, Professor Coleman replied firmly. Let her hate it from her cell while these students save lives she would have endangered. As I drove home, I passed the storage facility where Meredith had performed her illegal surgeries. It was now a community health center offering free clinics to the uninsured. The Chen Foundation had purchased and transformed it, turning a site of harm into one of healing. Inside my apartment, I looked at the wall of thank you cards from people whose lives had been saved by fraud prevention programs. hundreds of them, each representing someone who hadn't fallen victim to predators like my family. My phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number with the prison area code. Meredith probably finding ways around communication restrictions. I blocked the number without listening to voicemails. Some bridges once burned provided light for others to see by. My family had torched every connection with their crimes, but that fire now illuminated the path for others to avoid similar dangers. I opened my laptop to work on next week's presentation, this time for high school students, catching them early before desperation or ignorance made them vulnerable. The cycle of education would continue rippling outward, each informed person potentially saving dozens of others. As I typed, I thought about little Zoe carefully checking her stuffed animal's symptoms, methodically giving them pretend medicine. That child's instinct for careful, systematic care had survived everything: family betrayal, public trial, ongoing harassment from alternative healers' supporters. She'd grown up to be exactly what she'd pretended to be: a healer, a real one who understood that true medicine required humility, knowledge, and an oath to first do no harm. Somewhere in a federal prison, Meredith was probably diagnosing fellow inmates with coffee ground readings and prescription toothpaste, still certain she was a misunderstood genius, still causing harm while claiming heroism. But for every person she might endanger, hundreds more were learning to protect themselves. The truth had won, even if she'd never admit it. I smiled, saved my presentation, and got ready for bed. Tomorrow brought another shift, another opportunity to practice real medicine, another chance to teach others the difference between healing and harming. My scrubs hung ready in the closet, not chains as Mom had predicted, but wings. Wings that let me soar above the wreckage of my family's choices to help others avoid similar crashes. The little girl with the toy stethoscope had kept her promise to heal, even if it meant healing wounds her own family had inflicted on the world. Especially then. Epilogue. 10 years after the trial. I stood before a packed auditorium at the National Healthcare Fraud Prevention Summit, the keynote speaker for an event that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. Behind me, a screen showed statistics: medical fraud down 60% nationally, thousands of lives saved, millions in prevented losses. 10 years ago, my sister was sentenced to life in prison for running a medical fraud network that killed at least 4 people and harmed hundreds. I began. Today, the programs born from that tragedy have saved countless lives, not because one person stood up, but because thousands joined the fight for truth in medicine. In the audience, I spotted familiar faces. Detective Washington, now retired, but consulting on fraud prevention. Several of Meredith's former victims, now advocates themselves. Dad, gray-haired but proud, running a national organization that had protected thousands of elderly people from medical predators. Even Emma Watson was there now, a practicing nurse who specialized in treating underserved populations, bringing real medicine to people who might otherwise fall prey to charlatans. After my speech, a young man approached. "Miss Sullivan, I'm James Chen, Jr. I was 7 when your sister killed my father." I braced myself, but he smiled. "I wanted to thank you. Your testimony, your work. It's helped me understand that my dad's death wasn't meaningless. It sparked a movement that saved so many others. I'm in medical school now. I'm going to be the doctor my dad needed, one who understands why people fear traditional medicine and helps bridge that gap safely." As the summit concluded, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another letter from Meredith through the prison email system. After 10 years, she still wrote monthly, though I'd long stopped reading them. This time, something made me open it. "Zoe, the warden says I have cancer. Ironic, isn't it? The system I rejected now holds my life in its hands. They want to start chemotherapy. The old me would have refused, demanded alternatives, seen it as persecution. But 10 years is a long time to sit with consequences. 10 years of watching women I advised suffer because they trusted me over trained professionals. 10 years of your program spreading saving people I might have killed. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know that bridge burned long ago. but I wanted you to know I'm accepting the treatment. Real medicine from real doctors. Maybe it's too late for my body, but not for my soul. You were right. About all of it. I was so desperate to be special that I became dangerous, so convinced of my gifts that I ignored the graves they filled. Take care of Dad. Tell the victims I'm sorry if that matters from someone who took so long to mean it. Your sister Meredith. P.S. They let me read about your work. Proud isn't the right word from someone who tried to destroy you, but maybe in the end my darkness helped create your light. If so, then perhaps something good came from all this evil. I sat with the letter for a long time. After a decade of delusion, reality had finally broken through. Too late to undo the harm, but perhaps not too late for her own peace. I forwarded it to Dad, who called immediately. Do you believe it's genuine? He asked. Does it matter the victims are still harmed, the dead still gone? But if she's finally accepting real medicine, maybe others in her sphere of influence will too. That evening at the summit's closing gala, I received an award I'd never expected, the Healthcare Integrity Lifetime Achievement Award. Standing at the podium looking out at hundreds of people dedicated to preventing medical fraud, I thought about how far we'd all come. This award doesn't belong to me, I said. It belongs to every victim who found their voice, every family who chose justice over comfortable lies, every healthcare worker who maintained standards despite easier paths. It belongs to James Chen and Mrs. Rodriguez, and everyone harmed by those who confused conviction with competence. My sister once said I'd never understand her mission. She was wrong. I understand it perfectly. She wanted to be special, to be needed, to have power over vulnerable people. What I'll never understand is choosing that over the hard, humble work of real healing. But from her crimes came this movement. From her victims came advocates. From her darkness came illumination about how predators operate and how to stop them. She gave us the perfect example of what not to be, and thousands have chosen better paths because of it. So tonight we celebrate not just prevention, but transformation. The transformation of tragedy into purpose of victims, into voices of hard truths, into lasting change. That's the real healing my sister never understood, taking poison and making it medicine for others. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most were the tears on faces of those who'd been harmed and had chosen to help others avoid the same fate. Later, walking through the hotel lobby, I overheard a conversation between two young medical students. Did you hear her story, her own sister, and she still testified? That's integrity. Choosing truth over family. I hope I'd be that strong. That's why they drill ethics so hard. It's easy to know right from wrong in a classroom. It's harder when it's personal. I smiled, remembering my own idealistic days in nursing school, never imagining how personal ethical choices could become. But that was the point of all this work, preparing the next generation to face hard choices with clear principles. My phone rang. Mrs. Harmon, now in her 80s, but sharp as ever. Watched your speech online, she said. Remember that scared young nurse whose sister destroyed her scrubs? Look at you now. I knew that day you'd turn this into something powerful. I was just trying to survive, I admitted. No, dear, you were choosing to thrive. There's a difference. Your sister chose destruction disguised as healing. You chose construction through truth. The results speak for themselves. That night, I couldn't sleep. Too much emotion, too many memories stirred up. I found myself at my computer typing a response to Meredith I'd probably never send. Meredith, your letter found me at the National Healthcare Fraud Prevention Summit, where hundreds gathered to fight against everything you once represented. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm glad you're accepting real treatment, not for my sake, but for yours. Maybe in facing your own mortality, you finally understand why we tried so hard to stop you from playing with others. You're right that something good came from your evil, but that wasn't your intention, and intent matters in medicine. You intended harm disguised as help. That others transformed it into genuine help doesn't absolve you. I hope the chemotherapy works. I hope you have time to truly reckon with your choices. And I hope somewhere in whatever time remains, you find the peace that eluded you while you were chasing the power that destroyed you. Your sister, Zoe. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about the complex choices we face in life. Until next time, may you always have the courage to choose healing over harm, truth over comfort, and integrity over easy lies.